All right, man. It's been quite a long time that I have done an episode of Whatever Forever, but I'm really excited to be back. I was doing the whole personal, like, anecdote sort of thing where I kind of broke down my own personal experiences growing up and certain things about gaming and just different topics. But I figured that in the long run, that wasn't really going to be viable because there's only so many things and stories that I can tell or realistically remember. And so I want to expand. And recently I was in a podcast with a homie called Seventh Devon. And he honestly really inspired me to start reaching out to people and to start collaborating with people. And so for the next couple episodes, that's exactly what you guys are going to get with Whatever Forever. I'm going to break out of my shell as much as possible and try to interview and talk to new personalities and showcase other people rather than just myself. And today is the beginning of that. I am here with someone that I have been close friends with for a couple of years now. Someone that I interact with every single day, not only as a friend but also as I don't know if I you're not like my coworker or anything, kind of, but you helped me run my esports team known as Team Ultra. We've done a ton of different things together, collaborated on little YouTube videos, and we collaborate every day with Team Ultra. But I feel like this is the first time where I properly just have you on like a podcast. We haven't really done it in this format, so welcome, Cody. How are you doing today? Happy to have you on the first guest edition of Whatever Forever.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. So I'm looking forward to whatever questions you got for me today.
Yeah, I hit up Cody and I said, "Hey, are you down to do the podcast?" And again, the podcast originated as like me just talking about personal anecdotes and talking about personal experiences and being real and stuff. And I'm not gonna ask you like super deep questions like what is your biggest childhood trauma or something that led you to being who you are today. But I made sure that I kind of catered to at least what I know or what you've told me about yourself. And so I hope that it makes for a different version of what we've done previously with like the Ultra cast on for Team Ultra and shit like that. So by the way, you can
hmm
cuss, so don't feel free. Don't if you want to cuss, you can cuss. I don't really care. But yeah, give why don't you give me a little bit of an introduction for people who might not be familiar with you? Again, I feel like this is probably the first time that I featured you on my channel. I think we previously recorded something gaming related, but just
You never uploaded it.
yeah, straight up just being fucking lazy. I never got around to uploading it, but this will be the first time that you're actually featured on my channel. You featured me on your podcast, so I really just wanted to return the favor. And plus, you're one of my best friends this in these days, so I just wanted to feature you. But why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction about you, Cody?
All right. So to give you a little introduction, of course, I'm not gonna go too personal. Obviously, just gonna give you the brief summary. So I live in Canada, Nova Scotia. That's the province I live in. I've been here my whole life. I'm currently 25, and that basically I've been. I went off track there. I've been I've been here. That's how you know I'm tired. But yeah, no, I've been here my whole life. I recently, the past couple of years, I actually ended up getting my degree in information technology from home. It was really nice. So that's kind of helped me in the long run. Helped me achieve certain things. Besides my personal life stuff, I'm very into gaming, as I'm sure as 11 here knows. I mean, we run an entire team that's based off of that technically.
Yeah, and we'll get into that as we get further into the podcast. I guess
hmm
just right off the bat, I hate to cut you off, but you kind of addressed one of the things that I wanted to talk to or ask you. Um, I was born in Mexico. I lived and I was kind of born and raised there for I want to say until I was like 6 or 7. Of course, after that, I was kept going back to Mexico. All majority of my family is there. But I want to know what it was to kind of grow up in Canada. I know that you've and I want to get into your travels later on in the podcast as well. But what was it like growing up in Canada? I growing up, Canada to me has always been like this fictional land that like you hear about, but I nobody I know has ever been there. You hear about it in movies. When things get political, everybody gets like, "Oh, we're all gonna move to Canada," and Canada's like Nah, we don't want you filthy Americans over here. But what was it like for you growing up in Canada? Was there anything like interesting that you know, that you remember, or just anything that you associate to growing up with Canada in Canada?
Well, yeah, but what were you saying there about Canada a second ago? There's people that I've talked to. I think that this is like a running gag, but I think some people were serious about it. I don't understand it quite entirely. But some people say Canada just doesn't exist. They just say it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's like they're just saying we're not real people. And I'm like,
I mean,
okay.
if you watch like South Park, they always like make it seem that it's just like this magical fairyland.
Literally, yeah. But growing up in Canada, well, I don't know how much I can really talk about it because the part of growing up in Canada that I currently like reside in, and of course where I reside is where I grew up too, obviously. Um, it's a very niche and small part of Canada because when I hear someone talk about Canada, I'm thinking of the bigger provinces like Ontario, British Columbia,
Yeah.
all those kind of big ones. I'm way on the far east in a very small place compared to those. So I would say because to go back to because you grew up in Mexico. When where you grew up in Mexico, was that like a small town or not really?
No, not really. I honestly think that where I grew up in, the town that I live in is called Mexicali. So Mexicali or Mexicali is like immediately, it's close to the border of California, right? So it is one of like the bigger cities. It's a pretty big city, so I wouldn't really consider it. But for me, and I don't want to make this about yourself, about myself, so I just want to like just get it out of the way. But to answer your question, in sort of the area that I grew up in, it kind of felt like it was like a small town because everybody sort of knew each other. It was very tight knit, close knit. It wasn't really like the biggest. It wasn't until I got older that I realized how big of a city Mexicali was. And just with the amount of things and that they keep adding, I feel like every single time that I go, they just keep adding new things to it. But it wasn't exactly like a town. It's a legit city. It's like pretty big.
Hmm. I guess where I live, it's not really considered a town. It's more of like a city because like it's technically two cities. So I live on one side and there's another side and there's a bridge. Well, there's two bridges because you can go two separate ways, or you can just take the mainland and drive around. But either way, it's two bridges that separate one city from another city. The city that I live on, that side is definitely more in the size of a town-ish kind of thing. Then the other side is more of like the big like downtown, huge like city areas. But I kind of grew up in both of them because growing
Mm,
up, so my parents well, they're divorced and they have been since I was like 2 or 3 years old.
okay.
So it's been a norm for me for my entire life. So basically, my mom lived on one side of the bridge. My dad lived on the other side of the bridge. So I actually grew up technically in my whole childhood living on both sides because
Okay.
I would I mainly live with my mom, but whenever I would visit my dad, of course, I'd be on the other side. So I kind of have like this experience of kind of being in like a bigger city versus a more of a smaller one. I kind of have experience of both because I travel between both very evenly. So. Um, Other than that, I would say growing up in Canada per se was pretty standard for the most part for me. Just of course I had a bunch of friends around. Going to school, all that kind of stuff. Although I will say, when I was younger, I have traveled. So I live in Nova Scotia, and I have traveled to Ontario. This was even before I went the past couple years for Smash Majors. Before that, we'll get into that later though. Because I did go to Ontario with my dad when I was in sixth grade. That's the
Mm-hmm.
first time I ever. That's the first time I ever went to Ontario, and I went to Toronto too, actually. So that's the first time I ever went there. And I also this was in 2015, I believe. Yeah, I went to British Columbia for the first time. It's the only time I've ever been out there because my stepmother had family out there, but I haven't been there since. So of course, I mainly grew up in the smaller side of Canada, but I have been to the bigger side numerous times. And
Nice.
also, and also another thing in my childhood. This doesn't involve Canada, but it's kind of. I mean, it's still part of my childhood, which you kind of asked about. So I have traveled to the U.S. when I was younger with my parents and all that stuff before. Like I've been to California. I was in California in 2012 with my dad, and also went to another place, a couple other places with my mother and stuff. So I've kind of course, had the travel experience when I was younger. But if we're talking about just enclosed Canada, I've been pretty much just in one spot the entirety of my childhood for the most part. Which all in all, it wasn't too bad, but it was a bit limited. But it wasn't, of course, terrible. It got the job done. So
Cool. Yeah, and I can honestly really relate to that because so I again I mentioned that I grew up in Mexico, Mexicali, that specific city. And of course as I got older and when I reached my teenage years, I would often go back there. And for the most part, I have been living in the same sort of well town um ever since I moved here. I did move to Los Angeles one year, and I've mentioned that in another episode, and it went how it went, and then eventually ended up coming back here. If given the opportunity, I don't know if I would move back to Los Angeles. I'd probably would move to a city like San Diego. But yeah, I kind of share that similar experience to where I kind of just always lived in this specific area of California. You know, whenever I mention California, and I feel like you can kind of relate too, you know, when you say you live in Canada, people always think of like the bigger cities, the ones that that people portray or always get talked about in like media or like in movies and shit like that, like Toronto or the other ones that you've mentioned. But and for me,
yeah,
it's
like
like
well, like Vancouver, because when I said I went to British Columbia before, I was mainly in like Vancouver and all that kind of area stuff. So
yeah,
those are like the bigger places that people normally think of when they hear Canada. So
yeah. And when I mention I live in California, people always think like, oh, do you live in San Francisco? Do you live in Los Angeles? Do you live in San Diego? And I'm like, no, I don't live in any of those. um, but you've mentioned traveling a little bit there in that introduction, and you know what it was to sort of grow up in Canada and the area that you lived in. I know that you've traveled. You mentioned it to the U.S. several times for things like Smash Brothers tournaments, and you know just as you grew up, you know traveling with family and whatnot. Is there anything in your travels, in your travels to the U.S. that you've seen that you know you would never see in Canada, or things that you remember that you're like, I can't believe that they do things here, or I wish that they did this over there in Canada? Like, is there anything that you specifically remember, or you know, when you come to the US, you're like, oh, I can't wait to go do this because we don't have it in Canada? Is there anything like that that you vividly remember or like doing?
um, I guess when I was younger, the only thing I can think of, I guess, is I don't know Disneyland. I guess because we don't have anything that size here in Canada. That's for damn sure. Unless you want to talk about like it's like the Canada's Wonderland. It's a water park in Toronto, which it's very massive. It's like one of the biggest water parks in like the whole country. But it's not like, of course, it's just a water park, so it's nothing compared to Disneyland, obviously. I went there when I was in 2012, so I would have been 13 at the time.
Dang.
So that was like already 12 years ago. Holy shit. Um, so yeah, besides that, from my childhood area, not really so much I could think of because like I don't know. Again, I kind of grew up in like a rural area, and also even when I did travel as a kid, um, going to the U.S., it wasn't always like super big places. Maybe only one time. Although actually, no, not because now I think about it, because this one I can't believe I totally forgot about this one, because this was another place I went to in 2012. In 2012. So when I went to California, that was with my dad. But earlier in 2012, it was February of that year, and I went to New York with my mother and my grandmother for the first time. And we stayed right in Times Square, and that was like I don't know how that slipped my mind earlier. I'm really surprised I forgot about that. Um,
Yeah, I don't think
I
I've
was
ever heard you to say that.
No, that, and I'm pretty sure that was like the first time I ever went to the U.S. too. I think.
Damn.
Um, it was like nothing I ever seen at the time. I was like 12 years old, so I went to the giant Toys R Us they had in Times Square there.
Damn.
Um, then that shit was really mesmerizing because it was nothing compared to what I had at home. Um, and then I also went. You probably heard of this, but you know the Nintendo New York store.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, I went there too. But of course, this was in 2012. So the store was much different back then than what it is now. But that's I went there too, and that was honestly quite an experience because growing up, I was a massive Nintendo fan, and I still am. So, um,
Nothing's changed.
Nothing changed about that. So yeah, that was probably one of the coolest travels during my childhood, honestly.
Nice. Is there anything like, because I've, the few times that, since knowing you, you've gone to a couple majors, again, several here in the US. Is there any like restaurants or anything that you like here in the US that you don't have over there? I know that you've had a couple of first experiences coming to the US that, the homies have made you try.
Mm-hmm. Well, the only majors I've been to when I came to the US was Miami twice. And I guess we can count Genesis, even though we all know I was sick for like half of that. I only had one full day there on the third day. So I didn't really get much to. I'm not really gonna count Genesis because there was not really much I got to eat there in terms of restaurants kind of stuff, like experiencing new stuff like that. Because I was sick most of it, so I wasn't really eating anything at all, to be honest. So, um, but when I went to Miami twice, the first time I went, that was the very first time I had Chick-fil-A, and that was like probably one of the best chicken sandwiches I've ever tasted.
Yes,
which,
dude.
which, which, which we do have Chick-fil-A in Canada. However, it's in Toronto. It's not where I live.
Oh, so you do have it in Canada. Okay.
Yeah, I think it just opened like recent, like a year ago though, a year or two ago. But yeah, it's not. I don't have one here where I live. It's in Toronto, unfortunately. But um, besides that, there isn't really too many U.S. restaurants that I've tried that we don't have here. Probably when I was younger, in my childhood, when I went traveling, with parents and stuff. There's probably ones that I did try, but like it's so long ago now, it's hard for me to remember that kind of thing. Um, Although one that I do vividly remember when I went to New York in 2012 with my mother and my grandmother was there too. We went to Gordon Ramsay's restaurant,
Oh,
and
damn, nice.
we went there and like it tasted really good, but like the size, because I ordered a burger when I was there, and like the size of it was like I don't know, probably about that much. And this shit was like so expensive. It was
Oh my
insane.
God,
It was
bro.
it was insane, but it tasted really good. I guess knowing the price, it's a Gordon Ramsay restaurant, you shouldn't be surprised by that. But that was a cool experience, I suppose. Obviously, we don't have restaurants like that where I live, not even close. So,
Yeah. No, yeah, yeah, and honestly, I'm not too surprised because honestly, like when you go to like a major and stuff like that, especially since you're traveling from Canada to the US, um, unless you rent like a car or something like that, you're very much just kind of bound to your hotel, the tournament venue, and then again, if like your friends or whoever you're meeting up with want to go do something, it's just like point A to point B. There's no real big deviation from that, you know what I mean? So I don't
mm,
really like blame you for, not knowing exactly like the ins and outs and stuff like that. Hopefully one day, if time abides or, life allows us, it'd be really cool to like do like a big road trip or something like that and get to really know, because even then, like you said, like I've been living in California, I want to say pretty much the majority of my life, and I don't think I'll ever end up moving out of California. I feel like there's like literally everything that I would want here. But that's a question that I do want to ask you as well, is there anywhere in the world that would convince you to move away from Canada, or do you see yourself making, because you're young, you're 25, right? Yeah,
mhm.
so you're 25, you still obviously have like plenty of life ahead of you, knock on wood.
I,
I
I
don't
hope.
want to I don't want to jinx you. This podcast is not going to curse you. But do you see yourself living in Canada the rest of your life, potentially living out, big experiences down the line in Canada, or do you see yourself potentially moving out of Canada, making a life for yourself somewhere else, or is it just kind of like a thing where, you're happy and content there in Canada and you just want to continue living there?
I don't think I'll ever move out of Canada. I think I'm pretty content here for the most part. I mean, I don't really have any issues with it. Unless you want to get into our government, but I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm not going to get all political here right now. And I know you guys in the US, you guys have your own shit going on. So,
Oh yeah, we do.
um, yep. But for the most part, I don't think I would want to leave Canada because I got all my family here and stuff and whatever. And
Hmm.
also, if I were to leave, because like in order to move to a new country, you have to go through the whole like application thing. There's a whole bunch of like stuff you have to go through just to move to a new country, and I don't think I want to go through that. I don't really have any means of doing that.
Yeah, I don't blame
Um,
you.
yeah. Although although I do want to stay in Canada, I don't think I want to stay in Nova Scotia for the rest of my life.
Yeah, you've mentioned
Definitely
that
not.
before that you would like to be in a different city or a bigger city.
Yeah, I would probably want to move it's probably somewhere between Ontario and out west
Okay.
because those were the bigger experiences lie and even the job opportunities too. There's a lot of like major job opportunities that are like especially out west. There's a lot that I could do. So it's definitely in between Ontario and somewhere out west that I would want to go. Because you know, again, where I live is very small, and there's a whole country out there for me to see. So it's definitely something that I want to experience.
Nice. Yeah, that's sort of the way that I feel as well is whenever I did move to Los Angeles, it wasn't very I don't feel like it was on my own terms. It kind of felt like I was, I had just graduated and I had just gotten married and then everything was just kind of moving super fast and I felt like, that was my only opportunity to, start growing up essentially and so I kind of was and I don't want to say forced because I could have easily had just not done it, but I personally like forced myself to move out and it wasn't in the best, if I were to do it now, it definitely wouldn't have been in the same under the same conditions that I did when I moved out there. But again, I feel like here where I currently live, like I like it, it's very tight knit, you're bound to run into people whether you like it or not. My family lives here, but I very much do like the idea of moving out to San Diego, which is, the weather's fucking amazing, like literally perfect all the time. There's a lot to see, a lot of things that I like, and I that's one of my life goals. Last question that I do have for you, and like this, it get to know you a little bit. Um, One thing that I kind of coincides with one of the questions that I asked you earlier about Canada and what it's like to live there. One of the things that always sort of like keeps me grounded or sort of reminds me that I am Hispanic, living in the US, being surrounded by fast food restaurants and shit, American, quote unquote American food. One of the things that, keeps me grounded as well and, obviously keeps me true to my Hispanic roots is the food, my still to this day I feel like Mexican food is probably my favorite food of all time, just regardless of if certain dishes are just like the same thing in different variations. Is there anything like that you grew up eating that is more so connected to Canada that you kind of consider that for yourself, like a dish or something like that?
Um, hmm. What do I think of here? That's actually a really good question. Um, I guess not really per se. No, that doesn't work. That's more of a condiment. Um,
Or just anything that you like remember eating that, brings you kind of back to your childhood or maybe that that is potentially exclusive to Canada or originated there?
I can't think of anything. Well, I mean, this is a pretty basic one because when you look to Canada, I think any human being probably knows this. This is not really more of a food, but it's more of a condiment, really, that you put on food. But I'm sure anyone knows this because most of the food I grew up eating is like a lot of like standard stuff that you could probably get like anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, unless like home cooked meals and all that stuff. But um, I'm sure you know that Canada is very well known for our maple syrup.
Yes. That's one of the things I was thinking. I didn't want to bring that up or like poutine or something like that.
Well,
But
poutine is well. I'm not really too fond of poutine myself, but I have seen it being eaten a lot because my grandmother loves poutine, and
okay.
growing up, I was with her a lot. And poutine is something that Canada is known for because you guys don't have that there, do you?
I mean, I'm pretty sure that we do, but I feel like it's gonna
It
be Americanized. Like it's gonna have some weird fucking
yeah, it's
slather cheese
poutine
all
is
over it.
poutine is definitely more of a Canadian thing, that's for sure. But I'm
Yeah.
not really too big. I'm not really too big on poutine. Um, I guess there's one thing I can mention because it's kind of go. It's also a bit different than what you guys have. It's still kind of the same food, but what it's made out of is a bit somewhat different, and the name is also different. You guys know the food you guys have called gyro?
Yes.
We have something that's very similar to that, but it's called doner.
Doner. Oh, I think I've mentioned you eat that you were eating that before.
Yeah, so that's it's kind of like our version of that. Although I think the meat that's used on it is a bit different.
Mm,
Um, and also the name is different. So depending on like what doner shop you go to, well, not really doner shop because pizza places are the ones that sell those, but it can really vary honestly. So that's I guess that's one that I can mention. I guess.
nice. I think for
Yeah.
me, one, it's very simple, but Spanish rice or orange rice, as I like to call it, um, is like literally one of my favorite foods. I could eat it by the bowl full, and it's literally just that, like Spanish rice, a lot of seasoning, tomato. I don't even know what you would call it, but like it kind of tastes like tomato, and has a lot of really good seasonings, and it's mainly kind of like a side dish. But I'm a big fan of rice, like fried rice, chicken fried rice, or like shrimp fried rice and stuff like that. I could just eat it by itself. So that always kind of reminds me, my mom would make it a lot as kind of like a side to the main dish that she would make, and it always just kind of like makes me feel at home. um but yeah, no, thank you so much. It is very interesting to know, especially since I want to talk about esports at the tail end of the podcast. But I didn't growing up. I never really. I didn't have the opportunity to meet people from Canada. I feel like obviously, being in my own circle here, people were either here from the states, or from a different part of California, or came from Mexico as well. So there never really was an opportunity for me to meet anybody Canadian. Maybe through random people that I would meet online, but we never had those conversations of like where you're from, or whatever. So I always took interest whenever you were like, yeah, I'm from Canada, and then especially going into esports, I there's a lot of other people that I've met through esports that are from Canada, so it is pretty interesting to know. And again, the media does this wonderful job, especially with shows like South Park. They make fucking Canada out to seem like this like imaginary fairy tale land or whatever. So it's always good to know that yes, Canada is real. And it's not that crazy. But yeah, the next thing that I do want to get into, and this is, one of the bigger things, besides esports, that sort of I share very similar interests to you, and one of the big reasons as to why we even met in the first place. But I want to get into gaming because gaming is a big part of our lives. And I mean, if you look at my background, Cody literally has a game controller coming out of his wall. Like, we are engulfed by gaming literally every day. We talk about gaming every day, we associate with gaming every single day. So we literally are consumed, and exactly, we are literally consumed by gaming. So I kind of want to talk about it for a bit. The first thing that I do want to ask you regarding gaming is what video game changed your perspective, or made you increase your standards for other games of a similar genre? So whatever game sort of like really shifted, it made you aware that you were alive, essentially. Like, what was that video game that sort of was like, damn, like this shit is fucking cool. Like, I love video games. Like, this game made me realize that I legit love video games. And I know that sometimes after playing a game like that, whatever it is for you, it makes you kind of uphold other games of a similar genre, or just other video games in general, to that standard. And sometimes it's for the best, or sometimes it's, some people are like, oh well, this game is not as good as this one per se. But is there any video game that sort of changed your perspective and really solidified to you that, yeah, I'm a gamer? Oh shit, he has like 5 copies of that.
Now when I say this one, and I'm not talking about the remake specifically. I'm only showing this because I don't have a physical copy of the original anymore. So when I'm talking about this game, I'm talking about the GameCube version specifically. So just ignore that says it has Switch on it. But yeah, no. When I growing up, that was like one of the very first games I ever played.
You want to say it? Because
And
I mean, people could you showed it on the camera, but what's
oh,
the name of it?
Okay, if you guys didn't see it, it's Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. This is the remake version on Switch, which just came out earlier this year. The original came out on GameCube in 2004 and was one of the games that I grew up playing. And honestly, this was pretty much the first. Okay, again, I'm talking about the original version, so ignore the Switch logo. Um, this was like one of the very first RPGs that I ever played, and it was honestly, I'm pretty sure it was like one of the very first games I ever played. Growing up playing. Um, for me personally, of course, I'm sure you know this. I'm a pretty big Mario fan, and I'm really into RPGs. Um, that alone, just from my first experience with it, was honestly just kind of changed my whole perspective on gaming as a whole almost because again it was a big childhood game for me and just the way the story played out because a Mario in terms of Mario you never really expect a Mario game to have this like deep lore and story and like well written characters because it's fucking Mario. You would never expect
Yeah, it's
that.
always like Peach gets kidnapped, now you gotta go save her.
Yeah, but that game kind of well, I guess you could say Paper Mario 64 originally changed the formula on that, but I didn't play that one until later, so I'm not counting. So that game to me kind of realized that when you're looking at gaming as a whole, because again, there's a lot of putting RPGs aside for a second, there's a lot of games out there that are pretty straightforward and straight to the point. So of course, if you go back to the like I don't know, I guess the NES or SNES era, it was a lot of platformers, 2D platformers. It was always just go from point A to point B most of the time. So it was pretty generic and standard. And as someone that grew up with games that were like that as well, one of the games I also grew up playing was Mario Sunshine. Again, that's still one of my favorite games of all time. And that, of course, was still your traditional basic platformer game. Point A, point B. Peach gets kidnapped. Boom. There you go. Game over.
Yeah.
So it was all that kind of it was all just all that said and done. But this game kind of for me, again, because it was my whole introduction to the RPG genre, this kind of changed my whole perspective and kind of realized that gaming can be a story, not just something you play, but it can also be a story that expands upon just the gameplay. Because this game has deep lore to it, and it has a well, not really deep story, but it has well written characters that have a lot of personality, and it's something that you would never really see in a Mario game. So I think there's a lot of things. Again, I could rant about this game for hours and hours, but I'm not gonna do that because I'm not gonna take up with all the time doing that. But this game has a lot of charm to it, and the fact that this remake even still exists is absolutely fucking surreal to me. So yeah, this is definitely a game that changed my perspective on gaming a lot and that I will definitely forever cherish. That's for damn sure. So that's the game I would say for that. If we're talking childhood, at least, if we're talking about games I've played in modern ages, I don't want to get into that whole debacle because it's a franchise I'm going to mention that you should probably already know what it is by me saying that. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into it because I could rant about hours for that. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of people share that same sentiment about Paper Mario, especially Thousand Year Door, and just seeing the reaction from when that game got the remake talking about got teased and showed off. A lot of people were freaking out, and I feel like a lot of people share that similar perspective of you of yeah, like the majority of the time prior to that, and of course there was uh Mario RPG on the SNES and or whatever, but I feel like a lot of people had that first Mario RPG experience with Thousand Year Door, and I feel like that is the perspective that a lot of people hold of like, yeah, that's the first time that I've seen these Mario characters that I thought were just pretty straightforward, like have this deeper story and other characters really well fleshed out and a really cool story as well. So I feel like a lot of people would definitely agree with that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
um I think for me, um, I'm a big fan of the platforming genre, as are you. One of the, I guess, early childhood games was Super Mario World. Just growing
I knew,
up with,
I knew you were going to say that one. You've talked about that game so many times. I knew it.
yeah, I could again similar thing to Cody. I could talk about that game forever, but it just kind of like for me, like for the longest time, was like the standard of what 2D platformers needed to be in order for me to like even like them. Because it was just like super well fleshed out, and I just was like this is like the perfect game for me. I don't know. This is like the perfect platforming for me. I don't really know if I want to play any other ones because this is just like the one that I want to keep playing. But yeah, no, I actually need to go through that Thousand Year Door remake because I still have yet to do so. But I know that when I do, I'm just gonna be filled with nostalgia of my original playthrough on the GameCube. Um, we're talking about gaming, and you kind of mentioned modern gaming a little bit there in your explanation of Thousand Year Door. I do want to ask, what is a trend in gaming that you absolutely hate? Whether it be something that you have seen growing up that you are like, oh, this trope is getting so annoying, or more so with modern gaming that you kind of don't like the direction of. One of the examples that I wrote down was I hate the trend of life service games and just how sort of predatory some companies are with marketing their cosmetics and just preying on like people that are so willing to open up their wallets. I absolutely hate that because it makes me feel, well, recently we just saw it through Concord.
Encore.
Concord was like hyped up. It almost came out of nowhere. Apparently it was in development for like 8 years, only for it to come out and it just got shut down in like less than a month. Like the build up to the game lasted longer than the actual lifespan of the game itself. And it's like, I don't need to fucking get into Concord right now and just the state of Sony or whatever, but is there any trend in gaming that, again, maybe you've seen throughout, your history with playing games that you kind of are tired of seeing now, or something more new that you're just like rolling your eyes at?
Some tropes. Any particular like tropes that are in gaming, not so much.
Tropes are like trends that like companies do when they're putting out a new game that you're kind of like sick of seeing, or again, it could be a trope within games themselves, but I guess I'm more so talking about like trends in gaming upon release, or just things that you're sick of seeing companies do to their games.
Okay. One thing I can put here, I guess, what was like this is one that I don't. Well, I guess you can kind of call it a trope, and it's kind of a trend because like it takes up a lot of modern gaming as we know it these days. This is one take I have, and I've seen people say this before. Now, I don't have so much of an issue of a game having like this hyper realistic like art style, or it's trying to be like realistic to a certain extent. I don't have a problem with that. My issue is that I feel like it's become very oversaturated to the point where some developers are more concerned with how a game looks rather than how it plays.
Yes.
And
Yes.
also I feel that really ties into the whole thing of like studios being laid off because the games look good but they're just not up to par and they're just not selling very well. Like we've seen Sony have layoffs, Xbox just had another layoff pretty recently. Those are the kind of trends that I feel like the whole trend of games having this not futuristic but realistic looking trend is very oversaturated and overdone, and it's honestly kind of makes me glad that Nintendo's not in that ballpark because I feel like if they did that I would be just completely more sick of it than I am already. I feel like that whole trend needs to stop, and people, well, not stop completely, but I've always been someone that's like, you got to put priority over gameplay over visuals.
Yeah.
Because, like, just as we saw with PS5 Pro, of course, it's an upgrade of the original PS5 no matter how you spin it, even though it's not worth 700 freaking dollars. We can all agree on that. The fact is that Sony is, like, so far in it, they're pushing this whole thing of graphics, like, to have better graphic fidelity than they are in any other aspect, and I don't like that at all. I think it's terrible, and I think it's kind of unhealthy for the video game industry, honestly. I'm just not a fan of it.
No, I 100% agree, and I'm glad that I mentioned Concord, you mentioned the PS5 Pro. The emotional roller coaster of being a PlayStation fan or a Sony fan in like the past couple of months has been insane. Going from Concord and the disappointment of that to the extreme high that was Astrobot, which kind of plays into like not the norm of what Sony has been kind of doing with again, games like Concord, who, maybe the gameplay was fine, but again, it went for this kind of like sort of realistic sort of, not even free to play, but like you have to. There's like a barrier of entry by you having to pay for the game, and characters not really well fleshed out, and maybe subpar game mechanics. Again, going from that to the ultra highs of Astrobot, which is being regarded as one of the best 3D platformers just ever, apparently, to the incredible low of the PS5 Pro, and them being like, look at how many characters you can see in the background now. Look at how crystal clear it is. But you have to have a magnifying lens, otherwise you won't notice. Like,
Yeah, Astrobot, in my opinion, is like one of those games. Of course, I haven't played it because I don't have a PS5, at least not anymore.
and
um,
I don't blame you
Astrobot,
for it.
yeah, I don't miss that console at all one bit. Astrobot's cool, but it's not enough for me to buy a whole console for that. Because I only bought Sony consoles for their Square Enix games,
Mhm.
and seeing Switch 2 right around the corner, and knowing Square Enix is going full multi-platform now, bro, I don't even think I have to buy a PlayStation ever again.
No, and
If I don't
then
want.
they've been putting out their games on PC, so you don't
That's what I
really
mean.
there's no real
So
big hurry to get one.
That's what I mean, yeah. But not to get off because I got off a bit off topic there, my fault. But Astrobot, I feel is like a standard that Sony should really put themselves on because that's the quality they should be aiming for.
Yeah. That's like a love letter. I feel like that was like a love letter to like uh Sony fans and PlayStation fans. And
Hmm.
they've mentioned, and I absolutely hate that they even say something like that. I don't remember specifically who it was or their role within Sony or whatever, but I remember something came out where someone in Sony said that they're lacking IPs, and it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're just
I
deciding.
remember I
Yeah.
remember seeing that tweet. That was the biggest bullshit I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I
You-
could I could list 10 or 15 IPs you're not using right now. You're bluffing.
yeah.
You're so bluffing.
It's like, no, you're not. Like, Sony has, and as well as like Xbox, and I feel like Nintendo does the best job of it, but they have so many IPs that they could easily bring back that sort of break the mold of what is currently the norm, like you said, like the hyper realistic and shit like that. And yes, the games might be good. Games like Horizon Zero Dawn might be good, but again, it kind of plays into like the extremely realistic graphics. Ghost of Tsushima, a great game, but again, it's grounded in like some sort of reality. And every once in a while, I wish that they would do that, and it's fine. It very much has its place in gaming. I'm not saying, like you said, I don't hate it, and I've had good experiences with games like that too. I love certain games that look like that, but every once in a while, you got to release an Astrobot to mix it up and to really showcase that, like that those games very much still have a place in gaming. I feel like, and I feel like a lot of, especially more so specifically Sony and Xbox, they kind of don't realize that there's still very much a market for that. And I mean, Astrobot is the perfect example. Almost getting perfect scores all across the board. People saying that they loved it. Some people were like, maybe not you, but there is people that hear how good Astrobot is of a game, and they'll buy a PS5 for it. So it's like, I really wish that they would sort of listen. And I hope with Astrobot it kind of breaks the mold of that, at least for PlayStation. Xbox, I don't.
Hmm.
It's like cool Game Pass, but who cares? Uh,
Yeah,
um,
no, because the thing is like they have all these IPs they can use.
yeah,
But like, I wouldn't be surprised if they're under the impression like that. Okay, they know they have all these IPs, but they feel like they're unable to use them. Yeah, you're unable to use them because you keep laying off all your studios. Like
yeah,
you have nobody to make them. That's your own fault.
yeah. And I mean, we saw that recently, not too long ago. One of the ones that kind of was a big surprise as well for on the Xbox side of things, we saw Hi-Fi Rush, you know, very much getting critical acclaim. A lot of people really loved it, and it kind of was. It came out of nowhere. It was essentially a shadow drop. Shadow announced and shadow dropped. And it took a lot of people by surprise, and a lot of people really loved that game. But again, it was a game that was not exactly the most common game to come out, especially for Xbox. I feel at the time it was
Hmm.
incredibly colorful, cell shaded, had like shades of rhythm game sort of molded into it, and a lot of people loved it again. And I feel like people they overcomplicated, and I feel like that those types of games still very much have a place in gaming, and I really hope that they realize that with those games.
Oh, they do
Um,
now. They do. I heard like a lot of critical acclaim for Hi-Fi Rush.
Yeah.
Honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if that game gets ported to the next Nintendo console. Honestly,
Yeah, no, and thankfully I think the developers of the game ended up finding a new home, or so I'm really hopeful for the future of that. Um, Kind
that's
of
good.
bringing it back to how when we were talking about Canada and sort of interweaving gaming into it. I know that in Canada, mostly through you, obviously, since never really spoke about gaming with anybody else that lives in Canada. But I know that in Canada, the cost of things like video games are higher than what they are here in the States. Um, did that in any way sort of affect the amount of games that you played as a kid, and did that sort of play into you being influenced to resort to things like emulation, um just due to the cost, or did you not really feel that growing up as much?
When I was a kid, not really. I didn't really do much emulation a whole lot as a kid. There was maybe a few games I would emulate, but for the most part, growing up, because I always just kind of had all the games that I wanted to play that like I was able to buy them, and of course, when there was birthdays, Christmas come around, there was all that kind of stuff where I get stuff games like that for those occasions. So for the most part, no, I never really relied on emulation a whole lot. There were a couple games that I definitely know that I did emulate, but also at the time, the the hardware I had for a computer was really not that good, so I couldn't really emulate a whole lot of games. Like something like Dolphin, for example. My computer was so bad at the time I could barely even emulate freaking Melee on it. So so yeah, no, not really. I wasn't really too into emulation at the time. I think I emulated a couple like Game Boy or like N64 games, but that was really about it.
Do you feel like it kind of does affect maybe you a little bit more now, considering that especially I feel like now in this current console generation, games have went from, at one point in time they were $50, then they switched over to 60 for a while, and now they're fucking $70. Do you feel like that more so affects you now rather than before? And does it make you a little bit more cautious of, okay, maybe, yeah, this game kind of interests me, but I'm gonna hold back maybe for when it comes on sale, or I'm just gonna wait until later down the line because it's not like that crazy for me to justify spending
There
that much.
There was a couple times, yeah, definitely for sure. Like for one thing, for an example, released for the Switch earlier this year in June, Nintendo released the remaster for Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. That shit was full priced, even though the original was $40 on 3DS, which makes absolutely no freaking sense. So I was not paying $60 US, but keep in mind I'm in Canada, so that equals to 79.99. So that's $80.
That's what I'm
I
saying.
was
Yeah.
I was not paying $80 for that. And also one of those games that game wasn't really too fond of anyway because I already played the original on 3DS and I didn't really care for that game a whole lot, but I was considering it, but in the end I just decided not to because like I didn't want to pay for that and I didn't really care to play it all too much. If I wanted to, I could just emulate the original on Citra if I really wanted to.
Yeah. No, yeah. I wanted to ask just because I know that growing up, I had to sort of rely on things like my birthday or like Christmas, and just the off occasion that I did get like a little bit of money for me to sort of play. But I feel like I did grow up playing the games that I wanted to play or the games that I was interested in. So I feel like the games that I did really want, I had the opportunity to have them. It wasn't until later on that, maybe playing the official like hardware, but more so through emulation, I was able to play some of the games that I didn't get to play growing up, or even as I started to discover the internet, just looking up videos of gameplay of those games, people reminiscing of games like that. So I think I kind of share that similar experience. I feel like emulation has always been sort of a thing that I've done. And again, I didn't grow up having like this beefed up PC, so I feel like the most that I would ever be able to do was like Super Nintendo. I never was able to like even properly run like Nintendo 64 shit because again, my computer was just like not built for it. Um,
Yeah, the only thing I remember doing for N64 emulation, because at this time I had a Mac computer, like a MacBook or whatever.
that's
I
even
think the
more
only
limiting, I feel like.
it was because it was like a model from like 2011 or 2012. I think it was. It was
Yeah.
it was it was it was very limited. But I remember the one N64 game there. I think I emulated a couple, not very many, maybe like one, two, or three, or four, something like that. But the one that I did emulate on there that I actually ended up doing a full playthrough on, which was my first time doing a full playthrough of that game actually, which is actually now a game that I consider that's in my top 10 favorite games of all time. And that game was the original Paper Mario. That was the first time I ever played through the whole game on an emulator.
Dang, nice. Yeah, even I feel like even I remember one of my most fond memories of growing up in Mexico is that there was a lot of places, and I feel probably here in the United States at the time too, but there was a lot of places where you could go and sort of rent out video games for like the weekend, kind of like what Blockbuster and like Hollywood Video was able to do here in the States. There was a lot of mom and pop rental stores over there where you would go in and you would play a lot of games. I was able to like rent games on for the weekend and stuff. So I have a lot of vivid memories, very fond memories of like going to the rental stores and renting games like Diddy Kong Racing or like Donkey Kong 64 or Jet Force Gemini, just stuff like that. And so I feel like I even if I didn't own a lot of games at the time, I feel like I played a lot of games just because I was able to do that. Um
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no,
so
one
yeah.
one one thing. I don't mean to cut you off there. Sorry,
No, you're
but
good.
one thing you mentioned was Blockbuster. We actually have that here. Well, not now, but we did have that here when I was in my childhood. I never rented games there, but I did. I did rent like a plethora number of movies there before.
Nice. Yeah, when I came to the States, I didn't that wasn't so much a thing for me. I feel like my parents were kind of stingy about spending on things like that. So I didn't have a lot of experience like on the American side of that thing, but um getting into the next question, we talked about you kind of brought up Nintendo as sort of like the example of I feel like we always get in a tangent of how we're more so out of the big three, we're so more so looking forward to what Nintendo has cooking up next. Just because regardless of like even if they sort of do share that same sort of thing that there's a lot of IPs that we wish they would bring back or do more with. They always more so are more reliable with having those colorful experiences, or the Mario games, the Zelda games. Recently they announced Metro Prime 4 and just things like that I feel like are what I'm more so looking for in a gaming experience nowadays. um and giving considering the state of gaming and how it is, what about Nintendo do you feel sets themselves apart from the other two in the big three, from PlayStation and Xbox?
I think the big thing that sets them apart is, well, first off, they have a console right now that's 150, almost 150 million seller, so that's one thing for sure.
Yep.
um, but no, to be actually like honest about it, I think the big thing that sets them apart is that they okay. So back in like the days of like the GameCube and whatever, I guess not even Wii, no, because they kind of abandoned at that point. But back during like the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox era, Nintendo wasn't really so much an innovation at that time. They just kind of focused on the hardware, making sure games could run properly and have good like graphical fidelity and stuff. Because in that era, the GameCube was the most powerful console besides the Xbox. Like the Xbox was only just a tad bit stronger.
Hmm.
So Nintendo was actually kind of big on hardware back then. But when you get to the Wii era, they kind of like shifted their focus to more being innovation rather than the hardware power, which over time now, the Wii was literally almost 20 years ago now. Holy shit, can you believe that?
That's fucking crazy, bro.
That really is. So back then, that's when they started getting innovation with the Wii, the whole motion controls thing. Of course, we know the Wii U. We all know what happened with that console. That was a gigantic flop. But fast forward now to where we are near the end of the Switch's lifespan. Nintendo has been on the streak of where they're more focusing on innovation than hardware power, which people criticize them for. But I think that's probably the better way, because if you look at the sales of the current gen consoles, Xbox and PlayStation are nowhere near where Nintendo is right now.
No.
So they're focusing on having the games that are well polished, giving people the proper experiences and not so much worrying about the graphical fidelity or performance of games also much. Nothing about like this 4K 60 FPS, all this crazy stuff that Xbox and Sony keeps trying to push this agenda for, which I will never understand. So that's one thing that sets them apart, and they just kind of do their own thing. Like the whole thing with the Switch, that's like probably one of the most innovative things you can do for a console, because the handheld market in Japan is very massive, and the Switch appeals to both demographics. It's a home console and a handheld, because I have mine right here. Of course, you can take it out, take it with you on the go, or whatever you're doing, play in bed, which I was literally playing Prime Remastered in my bed the other night, so you can do that. Um, I think that's the big thing that sets them apart, because for pretty much since the birth of Nintendo, they for their consoles, they always had a standard. They always had a standard of having one home console and one handheld to go along with it. That's what they always did. Now with the Switch, they don't do that anymore. They have one centralized unit that is both a home console and a handheld, and I think that's probably the best idea they've ever come up with. If they going forward, if they just take this whole concept and improve upon it for their future consoles, I think they can just always stay on top if they do just simply that, because they all do their own thing, and that's the massive thing that sets them apart from the other two. Because whatever Sony and Xbox are doing is nothing compared to what Nintendo has right now. So that's, I think, the big thing. Nintendo focuses more on innovation, and it has games, unlike PS5. So, so I think that's the big thing that sets Nintendo apart.
I think that that phrase is more relevant now more than ever. The Switch has games, like it
It
has
does,
games,
yeah.
and I currently I have all like the in terms of like for each company I have like their most recent console. I have the Switch, I have the an Xbox Series S, and I have a PS5. And I was really excited for the PS5. I was incredibly excited to receive an Xbox. I was not expecting to get an Xbox. I think like 2 years ago in Christmas. But still to this day, the Switch is my most played console. Like just the factor of if I want to sit down here in my setup, I could just dock it. If I want to go to my bedroom and keep on playing whatever the fuck I'm playing, I could do that. Like without missing a beat. Like just that simple concept. And I think everything leading up to the Switch is what I feel like Nintendo was sort of working towards for. You know, we kind of saw shades of that in the Wii U. You know, I always call the
Mhm.
Wii U sort of the like a beta version of the Switch, because you
Mhm.
know they didn't necessarily let go of that concept. They just kind of, I feel like, perfected it with the Switch, whatever they had going on with the Wii U. And I feel like Nintendo made the best decision in sticking to their guns of we're going to continue to innovate, and they did so until they hit the home run with the Switch. And like you said, I feel like Nintendo doesn't have to do anything more than continue to potentially beef up whatever version at the time is of the Switch, and just keep going from there. Because we've
Mhm.
seen Sony try to replicate that with the PlayStation Portal, the fucking handheld thing that you can't be outside for more than like you can't step outside for more than like 15 feet without you disconnecting, and the whole streaming bullshit that they do with the PS Portal. I mean, Xbox or Microsoft hasn't really tried or attempted at like a handheld thing, but you see shades of the other companies sort of taking inspiration from Nintendo. And I very much think that in this whole debate of like the big three and shit like that, people get so caught up on like, you know, like you said, like ray tracing, 60, 120 FPS, fucking 4K gaming, when like even though 4K is becoming a little bit more accessible and more affordable, I feel like a lot of people don't even have 4K TVs or like access to like a 4K monitor still. So like to a lot of people that doesn't even like that's not even relevant
My
in their
my monitor's not even 4K. My monitor is only 1440p.
yeah,
So
my monitors are literally 1440p, and I like 4K is like okay, cool, but like realistically it does not, it's not really like a selling point to me. Um and I'm really I you know, as much as we criticize, you know, maybe the internals and like some of the like the online things, like the online and you know stuff like the UI and stuff like that, I would rather take that and have to deal with that than having Nintendo fall into the trap of like essentially what Sony is doing or Xbox is doing, because
Oh
I've
yeah.
always said this, but I've always felt that Nintendo has sort of been in their own little world doing their own thing and continuing to dish out experiences like they did early on with the Switch and continue to do so with like Super Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. Remaking some of their more beloved franchises, bringing those back. We're also gonna get Super or Metroid Prime 4 in 2025. Just this fucking year alone, where when we're at the tail end of the Switch's lifespan, when we were like, okay, what else has Nintendo gonna be able to cook up? Like the Switch is about to be out the door. Like what else are they gonna put out? Well, they said fuck it. We're announcing the first ever Zelda game where you could actually play as Zelda. We're bringing back Mario and Luigi, a brand new one,
Yes,
and
sir.
they are just like we got fucking games, dog. Nintendo has games, and
Mm-hmm.
again, the main thing that I feel like the argument that people make is like, oh well, it doesn't have the same specs as the PS5, but honestly, this little handheld that's been around for a long time, it's kicking their ass. It's kicking their ass.
It really
Uh,
is, yeah.
and it doesn't weigh a ton either, so that helps out a lot.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, Switch is on the way. It's out the door. Like, of course, we've talked about this before, and this is a giant thing that's been going on for months now. Of course, we know some form of a next gen Switch is on the way. Switch 2, whatever it's called. Um, so that's something I feel like it's just. I think it's if they just make that like a beefier Switch with a few enhancements and adjustments, that's all they gotta do. That's really all they need to do.
Yep, that's all they got to do. And I hope that, realistically speaking, or selfishly speaking, of course Nintendo always wants to innovate, and but I really do hope that they realize the home run that they sort of got with the Switch, and maybe they're like, okay, we're cool with settling down on this concept and just continuing to maybe innovate,
I think
on
they
it.
should. Like going forward, they should stick with this concept and just continue innovating on it. That's what they should do, because like they really struck home with the Switch. Because I feel like of all like their history of gaming from all the way from the NES to now, I feel like the Switch is just a combination of all of that, of everything they've learned over those pretty much 40 years. So
Yeah. And perfect that you mentioned the Switch too. And as we had mentioned, that the Switch is kind of like on the end of its lifespan as we approach it. Of course, I'm very hopeful, and signs are leading to the Switch 2 or whatever it's going to be called being uh backwards compatible and stuff like that. And of course, as a new generation of gaming gets introduced, or hardware gets introduced early on,
hmm
for a good bit, games that come out are cross platform, so there's not a lot
yeah,
to worry. But I do want to ask like what your thoughts on this. But if the Switch 2, whenever it comes out, we kind of know like by March essentially of 2025 or whatever, when the Switch 2 does come out and it has the same levels of success of the original Switch, the current Switch, or even potentially surpasses it just due to the hardware being a little bit better and more appealing to that crowd that is so quick to hate because of the lack of hardware potential like the PlayStation or Xbox. If it's to have the same success as the current Switch or even surpass it, do you think that the others, PlayStation and Xbox, would take that as a sign that maybe it's time to switch things up and to really change the way that they approach things? Do you think that Nintendo? I personally feel like Nintendo does have that big of could have that big of an impact, and if the Switch 2 comes out and it completely wipes the floor with, because I don't see Sony putting out a PS6 or the next Xbox by the time that the Switch 2 comes out. But if it comes out,
right. Not.
if the Switch 2 comes out and it outsells the PS5, it becomes like the top selling console, and it's just wiping the floor with Xbox and Sony. Do you think that they'll kind of like be take it as a sign that they need to switch things up, or do you think that they'll continue to just play into their current ways of approaching things?
Well, for I think for PlayStation, I can see them going that route just because look at the PlayStation Portal.
Yeah,
That add-on, of course. Well, people like to compare it to the Wii U gamepad because you can't take it with you, so it's essentially just kind of like feels like that. But I think the PS Portal, just like how it looks on its own, I can feel like that's more of like a concept idea that they're putting together for a potential, handheld console. Well, I mean, of course, they've had their handheld console before, the PSP, PS Vita. PS Vita, though, unfortunately, was a flop. But PSP was really good. Um,
I feel like the Vita, of course, maybe it was lacking in games, but I feel like now, especially more so thanks to the modding community, I feel like a lot of people praise it for its modding capabilities and what it could actually do. But yeah,
oh yeah,
but yeah, at the time, if it was just not really like
oh
the
yeah,
biggest success.
oh yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, no, nowadays PS Vita is like a lot different with all the modding in it and everything. Like even with the Wii U, the Wii U was like not that special by the time the Switch came out. But ever since the Switch came out, the Wii U has incredible modding now, which makes it like a top tier Nintendo console to use just for modding purposes. So yeah, no, definitely, I know what you mean. But no, the concept of the PlayStation Portal is something that I feel Sony might use to kind of make a hybrid console going forward. Whether or not they would use that as a basis for their mainline console, like where they would actually take the full concept of the Switch and have like as like an example, PS6 is exactly like how the Switch is, and of course Switch 2. I don't think they'll go that far. I feel like they kind of do want to stay in their own area with a home console. That just kind of seems what they want to do, and it's worked for them for the most part. Obviously, well, at least this generation, not so much. But PS4 and of course PS2, it has. And PS1, I think PS3 was a little bit iffy, but um, I think the thing is that if they end up going the route with the Switch, this like hybrid console, I don't think it'll be their mainline console. I can see it being like a handheld, like in the same line as like PSP, PS Vita, something like that. But I do think they'll have some maybe like home. It'll have like features that are compatible with a home console or something. But I don't see it being like an actual mainline console for them because ever since the Switch came out in 2017, the whole handheld like hybrid type console, like at the time, this was very innovative for its time. The Switch was
Yeah,
really innovative.
there was nothing like it.
Yeah, it was very innovative when this first got revealed. Nowadays, fast forward 7 years later to 2024, this thing is not as innovative as it used to be. Because now we have the Steam Deck, you have the Asus ROG Ally, and a few other little,
There's a bunch of
hybrid
them.
There's a bunch of those now, right? So it's not as innovative as it was when it first came out. But I feel like it's still a basis that some of the bigger companies like PlayStation, Sony, and Microsoft, Xbox could use to make a console that's kind of within this same scope of the Switch as a hybrid device. There was one thing with Xbox now that came up. I think it's about a year or two ago. This I don't know if this ever got confirmed or not, but there was apparently like documents that Xbox was planning on making their own hybrid console.
Hmm.
I don't know if that ever actually was true or not, but it was something that I saw. So if it is, then perhaps that is something we could see Xbox do one day. Um, Again, I don't think it'd be solely their main console, but I think it is an idea that Sony and Xbox will probably use to at least do something with. And again, we kind of already seen Sony do that somewhat with the PlayStation Portal, but I don't think it'll be a full-on fledged console like the Switch is. I think this is going to be something that Nintendo started. Of course, Nintendo started this whole hybrid kind of gimmick console, and I think it's something that they're the ones that are going to stick with going forward for the most part. But I can see other companies at least trying it, but maybe not something that would last like a full long term kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if they were to do so, it'd be more so in the sense of like kind of like what you said, like the Steam Deck or something like that, which plays like PC games and stuff like that. And um, I think throughout history, if we were to sort of compare, yeah, like I feel like Sony has very much taken that inspiration from Nintendo because Nintendo has always, they've had the Game Boy, then the DS and the 3DS and whatnot, and they've always kind of tried to do this handheld thing. And now they kind of sort of perfected it, sort of let go of the 3DS and sort of implemented, I feel like, what they've learned into the Switch. And then obviously, like you said, it led to the creation of like the Steam Deck and like everything else that is sort of in that same vein. And again, Sony has tried with the PSP. the PSP. There was a PSP that was all digital, and I think that was like a big flop too. It like kind of like slid open. It looked really cool, but it was digital, and I feel like a lot of people didn't like that.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't know that.
yeah, it was like it was still PSP, but it was all digital. And then the PS Vita, and then more recently the PlayStation Portal. And so I feel like they're kind of, I don't think that Sony would have tried to do that if it wasn't leading up to something. And like I said, I wouldn't be too surprised if at a certain point in time we do get I don't think that they'll ever not release like a proper home console, kind of like what they did or they're doing with the PS5 Pro or the PlayStation 5. I kind of feel like what you said, they'll try to do something where it's more feasible to where you can actually take the damn thing somewhere and continue to play your games, and maybe then it incorporates, but it kind of lacks something. I don't know. I feel like they will do something, and again, I wouldn't be too surprised if Xbox tries to do that, considering the fact that they have their Game Pass service, but they also have a PC version of their Game Pass service. So I wouldn't be too surprised if they're like, oh well, we're creating a system where you could take advantage of a PC Game Pass or whatever.
hmm This is something I kind of, just to go back on the whole handheld topic. This is something I mentioned earlier because Nintendo, when they created the Switch, it kind of combined the whole market of home consoles and handheld like console buyers into one. It merged them, the whole those two markets. It combined them into one console essentially. Because, like I said before, the handheld market in Japan, specifically for Nintendo consoles, is really massive. Like when you look at the DS, even the Game Boy, all that stuff, those things were a huge success in Japan.
Not only
So
just that, but I feel like mobile gaming like with cell phones is really big in Japan.
it is, yeah. So with that said, though, the thing is that like when you look at the sales for like PlayStation and Xbox, even in Japan, it's almost nothing compared to what it is in the rest of the world. Like
Yeah.
they're not very big over there. So I think the thing is what the is this is kind of main reason why I don't think Sony or Xbox would go full fledged with a whole hybrid only console, is mainly because there's just not a big market out there in Japan so much for PlayStation and Xbox. So I don't think it's something they'd want to completely dip their toes into. But it's
Hmm.
something they could maybe have an accessory onto. But I don't think it's something that they would want to have it as its like own standalone console because, again, the handheld market is big in Japan, but again, the market for Sony and Xbox is just not really there. So it's not something that I don't think they would want to really put their money in the bag into because in the
Yeah.
long run, it probably wouldn't be worth it. So.
Yeah, I think in the long run they'll very much just cater to whatever their main demographic or really wants, and I feel like more so here in America. Obviously, a lot of people, I feel like almost everybody has a Switch, especially during the pandemic. I feel like a lot of people bought Switches, and even if they don't play them anymore or or actively play them, I feel like the Switch is very very uh they just found their perfect marketing. I don't know, it just kind of sold itself. And then especially with like the Switch Lite, which is a little bit more inexpensive, and I don't know. I feel like Nintendo just really hit a home run. So
They
um,
did for
I,
sure.
I'm really excited for next year specifically. Obviously, PlayStation has the whole PS5 Pro thing going on. Who knows what Xbox is gonna have cooking up for next year? And of course, my most anticipated thing, the Switch 2 comes out next year for sure. So
Mine too.
we'll see what the landscape of gaming looks like in just a couple of months. You know what I mean? So
That's crazy. Like, can you imagine that the Switch 2 has backwards compatibility? Literally on day one, it'll have a better library than PS5. Just because of that alone.
yeah, no, it's yeah, I really do hope that the other two companies do take note of what Nintendo has going on. And again, I'm very glad that Nintendo has sort of stuck to their guns and just kind of been doing their own thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Um, the next thing that I want to get into, and one of the main reasons that I believe why me and you became close friends pretty quickly is because we relate on so many things that we do actively or similar interest. One of those is content creation. Content creation has been something that I feel like, just through talking to you, I feel like we have always tried to do, in different variations, different things. Um, and I guess the first thing that I do want to ask you, just as an introduction to this content creation sort of segment of the podcast, Can you tell me what it was, or what was your introduction to content creation? Did you start off on YouTube? Did you start off anywhere else? Like, what was your sort of introduction to the idea of content creation?
So I started with content creation. So, well, when I say content creation, this is barely anything because this
Just
is me with
literally
a
anything, yeah.
because this is literally me with a video camera as a freaking 12-year-old. So, but I did start on YouTube. Of course, I was 12 years old at the time. There was a very like well, it's not really big now, but back then and through like the 2010s, there was a whole big like niche of like have you ever seen those like Sonic like stop motion videos?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I used to make those back when I was like 12 and 13. Of course, those videos are a long YouTube history now. Those things are long gone. Um, and I also did like plush videos too. Again, this is 12-year-old me holding the video camera saying the stupidest shit. So, uh, but if we fast forward from that, that's really how I got into it. I think the reason why I got into that is because of the people that I was watching at the time was doing similar content, so it just kind of motivated me to do my own thing. Again, I was a 12-year-old kid, so anything I see is instantly gonna go on my into my head. So
No,
yeah.
I very much relate to that, and I think that's how I started. I grew up watching, and I guess this is it kind of leads into the next question I want to ask you, but around the time that I got into content creation or really got motivated to do so, I was watching people like Smosh, and I discovered the Angry Video Game Nerd, and I started to discover some Let's Players and stuff like that, and that really motivated me to, pick up the camera and try to do something with like friends or whatever. I have vivid memories of there was one day where I kind of like recruited a bunch of my friends at the time, and we had like this my family had like this digital camera, and we kind of tried to do like this first person shooter. Like, I was pointing the camera and like holding like a Nerf gun or something like that. We tried to do like a first person shooter perspective video. It never came out or anything like that, cuz I, for the life of me, couldn't understand or comprehend how to connect that camera and transfer the footage onto a computer. So those videos, maybe for the better, for the maybe it's for the best that those videos never saw the light of day. But I kind of, I kind of really wish that I still had access to my previous channels just to see how cringe or how funny or what my humor was like at the time. But one thing that you mentioned, and sort of like I mentioned, some YouTubers or channels that kind of inspired me. But I am everything cool.
Yeah, no. My one of my cats came down and scared the shit out of me because it was running.
Yeah. One of the things that I sort of mentioned, I am curious to know, what were some of the YouTubers that young Cody was watching at the time, and are they still around?
This is one you might have heard of. You ever heard of an old channel called Super Mario Logan? It's a very
Yes,
old one.
yes, yes.
That's one of the ones I was watching back then. That's was like the whole thing that was like one of my big motivations that inspired me. He's still going till this day.
Damn.
Although he is on a different channel now, his original channel is gone now, but he's still going though. I think he's like at like 5-6 million subs right now on his current channel, which is insane. Honestly, he's still going. Um, the other people I was watching, Angry Video Game Nerd, you did mention, I did watch that growing up. Smosh, another one that's a classic, which I still remember like a year ago. That's the original Smosh came back.
Yeah.
That was a freaking childhood like moment right there.
Yeah, it
That they
was.
Yeah, from last year. That was crazy. Um, and there was also what's another one here that I can remember. Because earlier I mentioned Sonic stop motion videos earlier. There was one dude. He's not active anymore. His name was PipletFan77.
Hmm.
So I used to, I got motivation from that specific YouTuber to do stuff like that. Um, Other than that, it was mainly just random kind of gaming channels I used to watch. Not really a whole lot of other. Now, those were kind of like the main like niches that I was into at the time. Other than that, not really a whole lot of other stuff.
Nice. Yeah. One that you probably don't know, because it was like,
Hmm.
he wasn't like the biggest or anything like that. I thought he was like a pretty big YouTuber because he had like 1 or 2 thousand subscribers and would get a good amount of views on his videos, but definitely inspired me to do like rant styled videos, which is something that I did early on YouTube. But there was a YouTuber called Brawlmaster 08, and
Oh,
that was,
I think that name sounds familiar. I think I know who that is.
He was like a pretty small YouTuber. That's why I say I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't know, because he was like he didn't have a whole lot of subs in terms of like what you would consider big, but he had like one, two. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe even he reached like 5,000 at some point. But he would do like rant styled videos, very like in depth rant styled videos, and he was very like he was very intelligent. So his rant, that's why he stood out from like people who were just like legitimately ranting. And that was like the first time that I kind of joined a community. I was kind of like invited to like a voice chat, a Skype voice chat at the time, from a friend who kind of knew him, and then I kind of got well acquainted with him and like a couple other people that associated with them. So that was like pretty cool. Um, and I guess just sort of reminiscing in that I'm like hitting the home run. I'm like on a roll with these segues for these questions. But what is something that you missed from like the old days of YouTube? And when I say that, I remember one of the things that I always kind of go back to when it comes to YouTube was just kind of how customizable YouTube channels were at the time. Like I
Yes.
feel like you could like customize the hell out of them. You could add different colorways. I think there was like a comment section, but like specifically for your channel, where you could people could comment on your channel, and you could kind of reply. I even remember when YouTube had like DMs people could send you, and you could private message people. Um and of course the rating system is like completely different back then. There was like the star rating and stuff like that. You could make like um video responses, like direct video responses to videos. But what is something that you miss? It doesn't have to be necessarily like features, but like maybe current trends or just things that you miss about the old days of YouTube.
Well, all of what you just said right there, pretty much 99.9% of that stuff is a lot of stuff I would say. That was like, in terms of design, that was like the peak of YouTube, and I there's a lot of that stuff that I miss.
Yeah,
Like the whole way you could customize your channel back then was so good. Nowadays it's so freaking limited.
yeah, it's
Like
just like your profile picture and like your banner.
yeah, I mean, you got the whole community post, I guess, which is a thing people can use to comment on. But like, you had like one specific comment section, which was a really nice touch. And the whole thing that you could do with the whole like that very early old channel layout is that you could have a banner, but you could also have like the side of it have like stuff on it too.
Yes, 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 there was like a whole layout to it. I forgot about that, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's the one thing I liked a lot about that. That was really freaking cool. I like that a lot. Um, but besides the customizability and how YouTube was back then. One thing I will miss, or well, not will, but one thing I do miss, I guess, is the whole thing. Because like this whole modern era of like TikTok and all that kind of stuff, YouTube Shorts, I feel like a lot of the uniqueness and creativity of YouTube is just gone compared to what it used to be in the old days. Nowadays, it's just like a lot of brain rot content. You scroll through YouTube Shorts. It's like a lot of the I guess magic and uniqueness that you would find from a lot of these creators back in the day were just kind of like they just it just kind of made YouTube feel more like a unique place than it is now. Because like when you go on YouTube, you can find some of that exact same content on like TikTok.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff that I feel like YouTube has kind of devolved in that way. It feels like they were like it feels like they were evolving but backwards essentially. It's like devolution. Um, that's kind of one thing I miss because I feel like there's a lot of trends that people just hop on now, and don't even get me started with some of the a lot of cringy clickbait thumbnails.
Yeah.
Those are like some of the worst things, and you never really had any of that back then.
Yeah,
Because
I'll go for it.
back
I don't want to cut you off.
back That's all good. Back in like the old days, you used to have like these people like just holding a video camera to their face, like ranting or talking about a specific topic, and that was acceptable content for the time because that's all there wasn't really a whole much back then. But I find like a lot of those old videos are better than a lot of the content that we see nowadays.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And I think back then YouTube very much promoted uh the spontaneous side. And like you said, I feel like nowadays you cannot get away with just turning on a camera. Maybe you can. I mean, there's obviously exceptions, like people like Moist Critical, who very much is like turn on the camera. focus on a topic and just make it funny, and that's the content. And he his whole entire thing is essentially that. No fancy editing or just keeping it real. And I feel like there's not a lot of channels that do that nowadays. And I feel like a lot of people, and obviously you got to do what you got to do, especially if you are aspiring to be a content creator. You kind of have to play the game, and that means having a specific layout for your thumbnails, and following a certain formula, sticking to a specific niche. I feel like very much back then you could, like, even if my content is primarily focused on gaming, the one day I could easily make a video about just a video about my dog or my cat, and it'd get like thousands of views. You know what I mean? Even
Hmm.
back then, it's funny because I was actually watching a YouTuber who was actually talking about sort of the same thing that we're talking about right now. But back then, YouTube did not allow you to have custom thumbnails. Like, I think at one point in time, it just kind of chose like a frame from your video, and that was it. And videos would blow up, and then eventually they kind of let you choose from three different frames of your video, and then eventually they let you upload your own custom thumbnails. But I feel like back then YouTube was very much it was more spontaneous, you know what I mean, and it promoted that spontaneous side. And I feel like over time, there was like the wave of celebrities, and that was pretty much all that was being promoted. And I feel like nowadays it's just, once again, you very much have to seek out the very specific content that you want to have on your for you page, and your subscriber feed. Like, you have to kind of build up your perfect thing, because otherwise you're gonna be fed, like, the very repetitive, like you mentioned, brain rot YouTube shorts, or like the what's trendy videos on YouTube. And you know I still very much think that there is that sort of side of YouTube, the one that we kind of miss, but you kind of very much have to seek it out, where I feel like, as before, it was essentially what was promoted more often than not.
No, for sure. I agree on that.
um the next thing that I do want to ask, kind of moving away from the YouTube side of things, and or unless it plays into it a little bit, and I kind of think it does, but we both stream. It is something that we both, I think, more now, we kind of try to implement it into our content creation rotation. Um how did you discover live streaming, and what motivated you to start streaming yourself?
So this was back in 2014. So this is when I was, I would have been, well, this was late 2014, so I would have been 15 at the time. I would have been just starting my first year of high school. So back then, so I still have it here. It's up there, but um, so I got my original Nintendo 3DS modded. Still have it, obviously. It's so it has a capture card built into it. And from there on, I started streaming Smash 3DS on. I think I started with YouTube on that, or was it Twitch? I don't remember exactly, but that's how I started getting into the streaming space. And as I kept going forward with that, I kind of realized there's actually a huge demographic out there for streaming. And all throughout high school, I pretty much just got acquainted with it, and I just kept going and streaming. I pretty much streamed like during that era of Smash. So Smash 3DS, I didn't really stream for a whole lot of time. There was other 3DS games I did stream. Smash 3DS didn't last too long because Smash Wii U came out very shortly after, and I had a capture card too. So I streamed that, and I streamed Mario Kart 8, Splatoon, and other things on Twitch with viewers and stuff. That's kind of how I got my start, just doing stuff like that. And this was back like pretty much 10 years ago now, which is crazy.
Damn.
So that's kind of how I kind of delved into streaming, and it kind of just took off from there. Just playing games with viewers. That's really all it came from, honestly.
Damn, nice. Yeah, I actually, we've talked about content a lot, and I actually didn't know that you started, when around the 3DS era, leading up to the Wii U era. Because for me,
Well, no, when I started, it was in 2014, so both consoles were already out.
yeah, so for me, I kind of was a little bit late to the party, just because I didn't have like the best PC, or something capable of streaming.
Oh, I didn't either. My stream quality was like 480p.
No, I mean, like, I feel like the times that I did try to stream, because I have a on my older channel, I have a live stream that I have privated that I go back to every once in a while just to see kind of like how I was, or like just to reminisce, I guess. But I have one where it's just me playing like a ROM hack of a game of a Pokemon game, and yeah, the quality was absolute shit. Like it was like just super stuttery, and my PC was just not built for that. And then I shifted to streaming from directly from my PS4, because back then it had that capability of streaming directly to Twitch, and so that was really cool. And then I started, and then it took a big long hiatus, and it wasn't until the pandemic that I really kicked it into gear with when it comes to live streaming. Um, I do want to ask. I know through talking to you previously, and we talk about content and aspirations and just things that we, us kind of kicking ourselves in the ass for not streaming or creating as much content as we probably should be, giving our our setups and everything that we have at our disposal. Nowadays, what is keeping you motivated or keeping you going when it comes to content creation? Like, is there anything in particular that you that motivates you, lights that fire in you to continue to content create? I am curious to know also what is keeping you motivated to stream as well.
Okay. Well, when it comes on the content creation side, specifically on the YouTube videos, like YouTube side of things, I'm sure you know this. I'm not very active on YouTube right now because like of burnout, other things going on that I'm focusing on. So like I just really haven't been doing much with YouTube lately. But whenever I do have motivation for YouTube, I think the thing that keeps me going is seeing the interaction from people like looking at my content and knowing that there's someone actually out there watching and putting like there's someone actually out there appreciating the work that I put in, especially if it's something like a topic or like a video on something that I'm passionate about, that I know that I put like all my eggs in my basket, I put all my effort into it. I think it's something like that, knowing that there's people out there that are actually, supporting the content. I think that's what keeps me going, and just seeing like a channel and like just seeing my channel in front of me, having all this content in front of it whenever it does get to that point, which it has before on my previous channels, but just seeing content that I'm proud of in front of me just kind of makes me motivated to do it. Right now, of course, I'm in a bit of a downward spiral because of things going on, but I'll get back up there at some point. So that's kind of I think kind of the main thing is just knowing that it's being interacted with is what just keeps me going in that.
What about for streaming? Like, what keeps you motivated to stream?
Streaming, I would say it's probably again just the interactions, having a community built, and because like whenever I do stream, it's sometimes single player games, speedruns. I've been speedrunning a lot of Mario Eclipse lately. By the way, you should check out that ROM hack for Sunshine; it's really good. Streaming that. Sometimes I'll stream like Smash. I think most of the time when I do stream, it's mostly Smash because again, I'll stream Smash with viewers like I have been, and of course I have a tournament series that I run. So getting just the interaction from that kind of stuff is probably it's just kind of the same effect that YouTube has. Just seeing the interactions and having people come together to actually like do like support what I'm doing and
Yeah.
actually want to like interact with me. I think that's really the big thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think for both, for me, it's kind of the same, where just knowing that a piece of content that I feel passionate about, that I had this idea, maybe felt a little bit insecure, but actually, went through with it. Just seeing people sort of resonate with it, take something away from it, just really motivates me to do it. And the same thing goes for streaming. On my previous channel, I very much look back at it as like a very high point for me, just because that's when I was like full force when it comes to streaming. And I really, nowadays, I'm trying to find the equilibrium of channeling what I had going on, just finding that motivation that I had back then to stream and again rebuild essentially my community. I still have very loyal supporters that I had when I started streaming on YouTube and then switched to Twitch. So I'm very thankful for that, but I very much want to, essentially repay them for all the time that they spent watching my content and supporting me, and, staying true to the original mission that I had, which was just giving it like a really good go of content creation. And, again, I have all these things at my disposal, and sometimes the sets in, and of like, you know, you've invested so much into it, like, what is stopping you essentially? You got to get off your ass and just do it. But of course there's other factors that play into it, life and things getting busy, and maybe you take interest in different things, and that plays into it as well. But for me, it's very much like a passion project that I'm very passionate in and absolutely love doing. And whenever I do decide to do it, or put some time and effort into creating a video, or really sit down and I'm gonna have a really good stream, it reminds me of like, damn dude, like it's cool to know that there is people willing to consume your content, to sit there and watch you, chat with you in a live stream. And that, I feel like that also really motivates me a ton. um Going kind of talking about streaming and content creation, kind of plays into both. Are there any big accomplishments in your content creation endeavors and streaming endeavors that you look back at and feel really proud of? Is there any, like, it doesn't have to be necessarily, it could be a milestone of like reaching a certain follower count or subscriber count, or if there's anything that happened along the way of you content creating or you streaming that you look back of like, damn, that was like really cool that I was able to accomplish that, or damn, that was like a really cool moment.
Mm-hmm. In terms of like YouTube side of things, now this would apply to not my current channel. This would apply to, well, kind of not really my previous one either. I think this really applies to my old YouTube channel, which existed from 2011 to 2016. And at that time, before the channel was gone, I had around like roughly 4 to 5K subs, I believe. And just to see that many people were actually coming through for that, regardless, was, well, even though there were people coming through for that, there were some of them that were haters, but I just kind of tried to wipe those off, honestly,
Yeah.
and not let it get to me. But um, yeah, I think that was something that I was really proud of, and I hope it's something I can achieve again with my current channel, because ever since that time, I feel I haven't been able to achieve something that high up again. Even though way back then in like 2011 to 2016, YouTube was definitely a very different space than it is now.
Yeah.
So back then, I feel like you could get away with like so many other things that you can't now, and people would just subscribe to you for like any reason back then for a lot of things.
Hmm.
Depending on what the topic and niche you were talking about is, that is, um, because YouTube is definitely more of a bigger competition than it was back then with all the trends, all the bigger YouTubers that are on the rise.
Absolutely.
It's definitely a much different game now than it was 10 years ago. So that's something that I think was something I was proud of. I'd like to achieve again. Something on the Twitch side. Probably hitting like the, well, actually, this is just recently. I hit the over 600 follower goal on my current Twitch,
Nice.
which was cool to see because I was stuck in like the high 500s range for almost like a year. Um, Granted though, there was times where I wasn't streaming on Twitch very often, so I mean, I guess that's to be expected. But like, I was just kind of stuck in that 500 loophole for almost 2 years, so to kind of finally escape that was kind of cool. Although the Twitch account that I am on right now is not the first Twitch account I had. First one I had, I actually abandoned because it got swarmed by follower bots and I couldn't get rid of it. And
Ugh.
my chat was like full of like a bunch of like bots all the time. It was just unusable. It was horrible. So I unfortunately just abandoned that channel. Still out there, it still exists, but it's not used. I haven't used it in like over 3 years. And I think that channel had roughly 800, maybe 700ish followers before I abandoned it. And then I think I checked it not too long ago, but I think it has like over like 900ish now. But that's, a lot of those are fake followers that I didn't ask for. So yeah. But for the most part, that's really it for that.
Nice. Yeah, I think there's been like several pretty high points that I've could look back on. I always talk about when I switched over to Twitch and being able to hit affiliates so fast, and just being surprised by like my community following me to a completely different platform was just really cool. There's been several times where I would react to something or like do something on stream where some like a big creator would like notice. Like one time I think I reacted to like an animation, Friday Night Funkin' animation, and like just a couple days later that stream, which would normally only get like 100 views, had like over 1,000. I'm like, what happened? Like, what did I do? I was just playing Pokemon Silver, and I just like I don't know what was so special about it, but then I saw that the creator of the animation I reacted to watched my thing on their stream, and it just kind of like blew up that stream. So that was really cool. And
Okay.
just like different things like that, just small little things, just felt really cool. Um, last question about content. You know, we talked about, you know, reminiscing about like achievements and whatnot, but I do want to ask, and of course, you know, you can never change the past. You can only, you know, make sure that you sort of set yourself up for success in the future. But if you had a time machine, if you had a time machine and you could go back to when you first started content creation, or when potentially at a point in time where you found yourself in like a crossroads of like, you know, do I content create? You know, maybe is this a thing that I should do? What would current day Cody tell young and inspired Cody about content creating? What is a piece of advice that you would tell yourself from like a couple years ago?
How far back are we talking?
At any point in time, maybe again a point in time where you were sort of doubting yourself, you weren't content creating, maybe something that you potentially, you know, learned now that you would love to tell yourself to potentially have more success as you continue to content create.
Well, there's a lot to kind of put it like straightforward and blunt, I guess. There's a lot of things that I've learned ever since starting content creation in 2011 on YouTube and stuff. So, like, because of course, back then in the early days of 2011 YouTube, I would just pick up a camera and record whatever the fuck. I would record, I would just record plush videos, or I would, you know, as I was a 12-year-old kid, I'd make stop motion videos, and there was a lot of things that I put out there that was very unoriginal and uninspired ideas. And I would probably, one advice that I would probably give myself is you need to be more original. That's one thing you need to do. Because back then a lot of my ideas were not very original at all, and the quality was not good. But granted, again, the quality I couldn't really do nothing about. I was a 12-year-old kid with a camera, so I couldn't afford, you know, higher quality at the time, obviously. So that's something that was kind of out of my control. But I would probably give myself advice to be more original, and probably just tell them to kind of just do your research on how YouTube kind of functions, like how to kind of play along with the algorithm. Because even back then, the algorithm still had a certain pattern that you'd have to follow if you really wanted your content to blow up. Of course, it's much more challenging these days.
Yeah.
Um, but back then, it still existed. But there was a lot of times looking back at it now, I didn't abuse the algorithm to its fullest potential at all. So even back then, I feel there's a lot of things that I'm mistakes that I've made and interactions that I had within that YouTube space at the time. So there's a lot. There's definitely a lot of advice I would give my past self. There's a whole list of things I would say that I can't even name. So not right now. So there's too many for me to go through. But
Yeah.
the main one piece of advice, just to at least give you one, like I said, would probably be just be more original. Honestly.
Be more original. Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
I kind of share that same sentiment. One thing that I would definitely tell myself, my former self, is to just, and this is not even like that long ago, it's just like maybe 2 years ago, just keep doing it. Like honestly, just keep fucking doing it. I went through like a big lull of it where I just stopped streaming. I stopped, you know, I never was like actively producing videos. There was like a point in time where I was like super inspired to produce videos, but very much my bread and butter was streaming. And so I would absolutely tell myself like just keep doing it, like just keep streaming, even if it's on Twitch, and or more so just settle on a platform and just keep on doing it. You know what I mean? Just even on days where you potentially don't feel like it, or you know, just stick to a schedule, because you know who would have known, who knows what could have came out of it, you know what I mean? And I felt like I very much was like on an upward spiral, and I just kind of hit like a flat line at some point. And kind of like what you said, you know, I very much I hit I kind of took I my burnout kind of hit at the worst time, because I on Twitch I hit 1,000 followers, and then I just stopped. Like my burnout was like at an all-time high, and I just kind of stopped streaming. And like normally people would take that as a sign of like, oh shit, I just hit over 1,000, like I gotta keep going. But I did the opposite. And so it kind of took me a while for me to like get out of that like slump and like continue pushing forward. But Yeah, so that was content creation, and it wouldn't be a podcast featuring you if we didn't at least get into a bit of esports, cuz again, just like gaming, just like content creation, one of the things that we have in common is we're very much intertwined within this whole esports thing, specifically when it comes to like Smash Brothers. And so I kind of want to address that as the last little bit that we have, because again, that was one of the main reasons, and that was the reason how I was introduced to you and how I initially met you. Um,
That is
so
true.
yep, that is very much true. And so you don't have to go super in depth into this first question because again, we've talked about this before in the Ultracast for Team Ultra, but just for anybody new that is introduced to you here, what was your introduction to esports? Was there a specific thing that led you down the rabbit hole that we are currently in? Recently, I did the podcast with Devin, and I had mentioned that when I was younger, I very much remembered watching on TV MLG, like Major League Gaming, with like when like Halo was like the top esports, and Dead or Alive was like the focal point of fighting games and stuff like that. But is there anything like that that you remember, or was it like similar things that you had mentioned before?
Well, if we want to get well, if we're talking about esports, if we want to go back further than talking about like actually being like a part of a team, I suppose,
Yeah,
then that would go because I mean, if you because considering tournaments, that's still technically esports because it's part of the esports space, so that still counts.
yeah,
Obviously, I would assume so. So yeah, my whole start with that was really with Melee and Project M for Smash Brothers because that's really the only esport that I've really been into. Um, so that kind of started back when I was in high school, like very early high school. I started with those two. Um, and from there, because like the only reason I started with it is because my whole high school had like a whole space for Smash. Like we had a whole like gaming community, and Smash was a very big center point of that. There would be times during like lunchtime, cause and there's like the in the high school I went to, there was like a hallway, and you would have like a centerpiece that was like off to like the left or whatever, or right, depending which way you're walking, obviously. It's like it was like a little cube area, and sometimes people from the gaming community would in my high school they would set up a CRT with like Melee or Project M on it for lunchtime,
that's so
and
sick.
I would play in that. A lot of people would. It was really dope. That's kind of how I kind of got into it because also not only that, there was a few locals that I've went to in my area at that time, and there was also the fact that the whole gaming community part in my high school, which I also did help organize some of that. I was part of it to a certain extent. Um, we had like this convention that would happen every May every year, it was called ObCon, and we basically there were Smash tournaments there. There was Smash 4. There was of course Melee, Project M. I think there was even Smash 64 there too. There was just a whole variety of games, and that's kind of really how it took off from there. Because a lot of my friends were into it at that time, and that's just kind of where it kind of rooted from. And lo and behold, that's kind of where it kind of led me to competing in Smash where I am today. Of course, nowadays I'm pretty much a retired player. I don't compete anymore. But I had my fair share with Project M, Melee, and of course Ultimate. Smash 4 to an extent, but I prefer not to remember that time. Those very dark times.
Yeah.
Wasn't all bad, but yeah. So that's kind of where it started. And then if you want to get now into the esports side of it, where actually the teams get involved, did you want me to save that for later, or were you trying to ask something else first?
No, yeah, no. I was just more the question that I was gonna ask is like what and of course I know this because we've talked about this before, but what was the sort of thing that pivoted you? Because of course you were more so a competitor, and you mentioned that in high school you would go to some locals, and even if it wasn't necessarily directly associated with esports, it was still the competitive side of things, right? Which is again what esports is all about, the competition. What was the moment that sort of led you down, like, okay, there's the competitive side of things as a competitor. What initiated the whole esports thing for you? Like, what was it that, did you join a team? Did you start your own team? Like, what sort of led to one or the other?
If we're talking about that part, honestly, what led me towards that would be like, so this is actually during the pandemic. Actually, this was in the summer of 2021. So during that time, I was doing a lot of Wi-Fi tournaments, obviously because that was my only sake of doing tournaments because we were all locked inside, pandemic. So I had no choice. Everybody was just doing Wi-Fi tournaments at the time because there was no other choice. You didn't really have any choice. So that's what I was doing at the time. And lo and behold, this random guy that apparently was was an owner of an organization, which in hindsight, calling that an organization is actually way too much of a compliment because it doesn't even deserve that. Uh, um, but I got a DM from this guy. His name was Orca, I believe, and he was apparently running his own team at the time, and he saw what I was doing previously in tournaments, and he knew who I mained and all. Pyramithra, by the way, if any of you guys want to know who I main in Ultimate, still do to this day. Um, that's kind of what led me to join a team. I said I've never been on a team before. I'll try it. Of course, I was not really sure what I was getting myself into because I was never part of a team before. Lo and behold, that's kind of what got me into the whole esports like team space. That team unfortunately was a complete dumpster fire. So, but that whole interaction was kind of led to that happening. And as soon as that, well, the team didn't go down. I left it, and then the team got shut down a little bit later on. But when I left that team, I essentially wanted to continue the whole branding of continuing like I have a team going. So that's what led to the birth of Nova Esports, which was a team that I ran from 2021 to the very beginning of 2023. So what that was essentially was my own esports, obviously centered around Smash Brothers. So I
Hmm.
brought that in, and that's how I'm. That's pretty much how I met you,
Yeah.
because you joined as a content creator. Because of Nova's creation, that's how I met a lot of my friends that I still talk to this day. Some of them I've met in person, including you, even though I didn't meet you for very long because I was sick, but still counts.
Yeah, that's
um,
the kind of.
hmm that's just really what led to that. So that whole interaction I had with that one guy, even though his team was absolutely abysmal, that one interaction is what led to this whole thing. So I'm actually kind of grateful for it. Because
Nice.
if it wasn't for me having that interaction, I probably wouldn't know you right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. I think it was very similar for me, like I just randomly, and it wasn't like anybody approaching me. I kind of like was the one that was more so interested in joining a team or whatever and doing my own research. But yeah, no, I don't think I would have if I didn't take interest in it at all, cuz at the time I was more so focused on just being a content creator, just being a streamer, and so I was perfectly content with it, but just randomly I had like this asphyxiation for, I want to be part of a team. How do I go about doing this? I want to expand. I want to, get more into the Smash community. But yeah, no, I don't think that our paths would have crossed if it wasn't for that. Um,
Definitely not. Yeah, and just like the whole creation of that team, like it led to me meeting a lot of my friends that they're pretty much the online friends, but like I've met them in person at least a couple of times now.
yeah,
So just because of that whole team's creation, it led to that. And I think even Team Ultra, of course I'm a co-owner for it. Of course, your team that you own. Um, because I think you've said this before, isn't kind of what like Nova and of course, as there was at the time in World Esports, isn't those teams alone was kind of part of the motivation that led you to creating at the time known as Deathbed Esports, which of course is now Team Ultra.
yeah, kind of similar to what you had said about your experience with that other team. It left you kind of wanting more, or kind of wanted you, kind of motivated you to do your own thing. And yeah, I always say this, and I always credit you and YC, but if it wasn't for those early teams that I joined, the World Esports at the time and the Nova Esports, I I wouldn't have not been motivated to start my own thing. and then again it led me down another rabbit hole of actually being an owner of the team. So yeah, it's pretty wild that that's how that whole thing birthed from being part of those two things.
Yep.
um you mentioned Nova Esports, and again, you don't have to get into the specific of it, but the specifics of what went down with it, it had it. I just want to solely remember it for the good times, because again, whenever I speak about it, I speak fondly of it, just because I very much think that it delivered. There was a lot of teams coming up at the time, and whether they were kind of like a joke thing more so, or like a crew thing or whatever. I very much did think that, or still do think that Nova Esports had like a very high standard, and there was like one side of esports, and then or of online teams, and then there was kind of like Nova Esports, which felt a little bit more cleaned up, a little bit more like it was more so legit, I felt like. um when it comes to esports, what do you think? And this could be whether it be you, being an owner of something, leading something, or even as a competitor. What do you think is your biggest accomplishment when it comes to esports?
I think my biggest accomplishment, honestly, is there are a few things
It could be a
on the
couple. It doesn't have to be just one.
okay. Well, I do want to name the biggest. I would have said some of my rankings previously probably would have been something like that. But I think the one I'm most proud of, even though it doesn't exist anymore, Nova Esports was probably the best accomplishment for me personally, just because of how much it gave birth to all these people of me meeting, friendships made, and you know to hear that Deathbed Esports at the time, or as now known as Team Ultra, that that team's creation was solely, well, not solely, but it was partially created because of inspiration from Nova is honestly really awesome to me. And it's just because I've met so many people just because of that one team alone. It brought so many people together, and again, I've met people in person now because of that team's existence alone. And honestly, too, just because of that team's existence, it led me to traveling to all these majors. I don't think I ever would have gone to those majors had I not created that. So I
Right.
think I think that's probably my biggest accomplishment in esports for sure, for me personally.
Nice. Yeah, I think you know, just considering the landscape of esports, and and I think this could be like a topic for another day, or just like within its own video, but especially now, within the landscape of esports, and even today, we just, at the time of this recording, we just saw the fall of what we thought was one of the, or at least in my opinion, was a very promising team, especially when it comes to Smash Brothers, Stride Esports, closing all operations when it comes to the esports side of things. Um,
Mhm.
it's very volatile. It's very much like a very, you have to be very careful with the way that you approach things, and especially for teams that are very grassroots, sort of funded by the individuals that started, and not so much backed by like a big company, or like crypto or whatever. Things happen. Teams come and go, but no, yeah, I definitely do think that when it's all said and done, I think that Deathbed, or the creation of Deathbed, or and eventually it turning into Team Ultra, would definitely be my biggest accomplishment when it comes to esports, just due to the fact that it it opened up a ton of opportunities for me to meet new people, and just motivated me to do a whole lot. It motivated me to, I never considered myself a competitor, but it motivated me to go to these events. Just this year alone, I went to Genesis, and I don't know if I was in esports, or if I was in Team Ultra, or started this whole thing, that I would have been motivated. Up until that point, I was perfectly content just being a spectator. I thought it would be cool to at one point in time go to those things, but just knowing that there is people there that are under that Ultra banner, or at one point Deathbed banner, really motivates me to know that that I should go out to these events. But no, yeah, I very much share that same sentiment of starting up a team is probably like would be um the biggest accomplishment. And honestly, yeah, I don't blame you for that being your, or I don't, it doesn't surprise me that that is your biggest accomplishment, because again, I think that a lot of time, I think at the time, a lot of people did take inspiration from whether you want to admit it or not, or maybe didn't see it that way. But I feel like a lot of people, myself included, took inspiration from what Nova was doing at the time, and what you guys had accomplished at the time, and just within those couple of years that you guys were around. So yeah, I definitely do think that is something that to be proud of for sure.
Yeah, I definitely am for sure. It's definitely one of my more prouder even a word. I don't think it's a word.
Just proud.
More proud accomplishments, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of, we mentioned Smash Brothers. You mentioned that as like the reason why you got into esports, or like the game that you played that sort of led to you getting into esports. When it the yeah, the main game that we associate with, with Ultra, and even for Nova, it was Smash Brothers, and I feel like I'm very much consumed for Smash Brothers. But what are your thoughts on the current landscape of the competitive Smash Ultimate scene? Do you have any like thoughts? And it doesn't have to be just like the esports side of things, just more so, you know, what you have seen in the last couple of years.
When you say in terms of the competitive Smash Brothers scene, would you say Smash Brothers or Smash Ultimate?
Um, I guess when I wrote the question, I more so had Ultimate in mind. Yeah, I wrote Smash Ultimate.
Hmm.
Because again, that's like the one that we more so focus on.
Okay. Yeah, because what I was gonna describe is more focused on all. It pretty much is entirely focused on Ultimate. I was gonna say because like when you ask this question, can I like talk about the game itself too?
Yeah, 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 for sure.
Okay. Um. So in terms of the community for the competitive Smash Ultimate scene, so within the past well, if you go back to 2020, we all know what happened in the community. That was one of the biggest. The summer of that year was a freaking tragedy for the Smash community. I'm not gonna get into it, but I think if you're part of the community, you know what happened, went down that time in the
Mm,
summer of 2020. A lot of stuff got exposed, and the whole community was just kind of uproared, and there was a lot of change since then. Fast forward now, 4 years later, into 2024, which this year is like almost over already. Holy shit.
yeah, dude.
Uh, Fast forward now to this point in time, though. Um, I think the way, because like you mentioned, Shard Esports shutting down. Of course, they were very focused in the Smash Ultimate space in terms of esports. I think the issue is right now what's been going on is that for some of these tournaments, there's definitely a lack of funding in some areas because we've seen specific majors be canceled, shut down. Like for example, we had Shine last year. The Shine that happened last year was the very last one. That tournament series is gone, and that was a pretty staple one in the community. It was always every August, and that's gone now. We have the Big House, which is a very, very huge one, and is the staple of the community that's been around for at least 10. Well, this year would have been Big House number 12, I think. So yeah, it's been around for over a decade. That was a big hit. They pretty much shut it down because they didn't have the funding or even like the time and people to do it. So funding is definitely an issue with that. There's a few other ones that have kind of suffered that same fate, and I feel like the whole esports industry as a whole has been kind of on a downfall. And just because like starting out, Smash never really had a too big of a funding compared to other esports games. I feel like Smash is kind of in more of a dire situation than other ones because we have these big tournaments, these big staple tournaments that have been around for so many years not happening anymore, being shut down, teams shutting down, players being let go. I think right now, in terms of that part of it, there's a lot of it where the Smash Ultimate competitive scene doesn't feel too healthy because any like from what's happened so far, anything could happen at any moment, and everything could be just changed dramatically within a blink of an eye, and we don't know what could be taken from us because we've had several things taken from us already, and we don't know what could be next.
Yeah.
And the melee side of things is kind of in the same vein because I mean it's still part of the Smash community, obviously, so they are suffering in that same way, but if we talk about the competitive side of for the game itself, talking about the game's meta, That's a very different conversation.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of things I could say about Ultimate's meta that I feel is not so good for the game's like competitive health. I think Melee's is fine because Melee has been around for over 20 years. So Melee I think is perfectly fine competitive health wise. There's nothing wrong with that. Ultimate is what is kind of the problem. Uh, some characters being a bit unbalanced, and there's just I don't even know how to phrase it because there's a lot of things I could talk about Ultimate's meta. I know some people would probably call me crazy for some things that I would probably list. People would call it hot takes and all that. But right now, for the competitive Smash scene as a whole, or just Ultimate, I think right now the space that it's in is definitely not the best space. It definitely can be better. Because there's just things that can be ripped away from us in the blink of an eye because it's happened before several times and it's probably going to happen again. So it's definitely could be in a better space right now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with pretty much all you said. I think that Smash Brothers as a whole is not the most profitable esports. Um
It's not because Nintendo doesn't do shit.
yeah, and I feel like, it is a shame, and I feel like a lot of the responsibility for, and the lifespan of Smash, not just Ultimate, but like just Smash in general, is very much up to the community. Because again, the big developer, they don't fully fund it, and when they do, it's kind of like in a weird rule set. Very demanding requirements that they ask when they do like their own specific things or whatever. They very much have their own vision of things, and it's either like you have to abide by it, or you just kind of have to do your own thing and then fund everything yourself. um a lot of running an esports team, just on a small scale, I can't imagine how it is on a bigger scale, but on a smaller scale, obviously from experience and still actively doing it today, and sort of realizing that at some point you're gonna have to take a step back and reevaluate. um it's very expensive. It's very expensive, especially if you want to do it in a consistent manner, if you want to stand out, if you want to attract bigger players, bigger names. It very much is a thing where you have to um, invest a lot into it. But you also have to be very smart about it. And for these bigger companies, we mentioned recently, or just today, Stride Esports just completely shutting down all esports operations. Um, Esports as a whole is going in a direction where, again, you have to be very careful with the way that you maneuver yourself within the space. Otherwise, again, like you said, at any moment in time, everything could just go away. And when it
That's
comes
what I
to
mean. Yeah,
and when you already have a scenario like that, not just for Smash in general, but just in esports in general, considering Smash Brothers not being the most profitable esport out there, I don't find it very surprising when a company or when an esports organization is like, we're cutting all operations when it comes to Smash Brothers. Like, we're gonna focus on the other big ones like Call of Duty, uh, just Call of Duty, Valorant, just games like that that are get the bigger numbers, and it potentially could be a little bit more profitable than when it comes to Smash Brothers. Um, and that's why you see a lot of teams come and go. Is because of the landscape of that. Maybe people realizing that things get expensive. And it's also, it's a very grassroots thing. You have to be very passionate about it, otherwise it's not going to be successful. um and again, a lot of it does specifically for the ultimate side of things. I feel like a lot of the community, unfortunately, and I feel like at times rightfully so, due to some of the mechanics in the game, specific characters in the game. I feel like nowadays it's like a battle for viewership. A lot of just recently, one of the very common things, or one of the things that I saw on Twitter, was a lot of people giving Luminosity Gaming a lot of scrutiny, just due to the fact that they're doing this whole invitational, and they did this LCQ, last chance qualifier, and some pretty notable players weren't invited, just mainly due to the characters that they played. And so it's very much a battle of viewership, and at the end of the day, that's all you could really do, or strive for when it comes to Smash Brothers. Content creation is like, it's like the biggest thing, of course. it pretty much fuels everything. So again, if the numbers are down, then it's like, well, is Smash really worth it? Because again, it doesn't bring any big investors or per se. So you have to be really passionate about Smash in order for it to be successful. Melee, I feel like, is in a pretty good place just due to the fact that like the meta, when it comes to the characters and the mechanics, has been there for 20 years or whatever. And so now it's up to the community and for the players, new generation of talent to come through and to keep the game alive. And that's essentially what has been keeping the game alive. And I feel like the fan base or the community for Melee is a little bit, I feel like is I mean, it has to be uh more, I mean, I don't like comparing like who's more passionate, but I feel like Melee and the Melee community is very do or die. Like they will ride or die for that
Oh,
game.
oh
Like
yeah.
very passionate about it. A lot of these bigger, invitationals. I mean, old Summit, unfortunately not a thing around, but not
That,
around
that
anymore.
again, that's one thing I mentioned. Not to cut you off, sorry. But that's one thing I mentioned of the Smash community having stuff ripped away from us. Summit was a very big staple of the Smash community. That's gone now because they couldn't fund it anymore.
Yeah, and so it's like things like that. So I honestly think that when the next Smash Brothers game comes out, whatever it is going to be called and whatever it's going to be looking like, I feel like Melee is still going to continue to thrive just because it's already so ingrained in not only the Smash community but just within esports. But again, at any moment's notice, anything could happen, and an organization could easily just drop their ultimate side of things, or an organization that's known for primarily for Smash Ultimate or for Smash could easily just again just shut their doors down, close doors, just due to the fact of the esports scene is very volatile, very, again, you have to be very careful with the way that you maneuver around it. Um, the next question that I do want to ask you is, um, do you think you would play games like Smash Ultimate as much as you currently do, or even consider playing certain games that have competitive slash esports side if you weren't involved in esports in some capacity? Like, do you think that you would play Smash Ultimate as much as you currently do if you weren't so intertwined with potentially like Team Ultra or have this esports background to you? Do you think that you would play it as much as you do, or do you think that you would probably play it less if you weren't?
No, no, I absolutely would not because it's everything that I'm part of is just kind of what has me just wanting to keep going on the game, honestly. So if I didn't have any of this background stuff, esports and all this kind of stuff, I definitely would not be on the game, and I probably would not care about Smash as much as I do.
Nah, yeah, I feel the same. I honestly do feel the same. Sometimes I feel like I play the game because I mean, I like to know that I'm good at the game, right? I do want to be good, but I definitely do think that I wouldn't play it as much if I wasn't involved in this whole esports thing. Like, if tomorrow something happens and I have to close doors with Ultra or whatever, I feel like I would more so be focused on. I feel like I maybe for the foreseeable future, I'm still gonna be interested in esports or whatever, but I feel like I would more so focus on being a content creator for a team or whatever, and not so much focus on like being a Smash Brothers competitor or like a streamer or like an organization that mainly focuses on Smash.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm definitely right there with you. I feel like being the owner or and being so engulfed with Smash Ultimate in particular, it very much is my biggest motivating factor to play it as much as I do.
Hmm. That makes sense. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
because it's just kind of the same boat as me, honestly.
Yeah. Uh Second to last question here before we wrap things up. I mentioned that you've been in esports for quite a while. What is keeping you motivated to stay within the space given some of the hardships that you've been through? I know that you mentioned, you having to, close doors with Nova. You're currently part of Team Ultra, formerly Deathbed. What is the thing that's keeping you motivated? I know that, you know, that's how essentially we became friends, and you met a ton of people that you consider friends nowadays. thanks to esports, but you know, given the landscape, given how things have shifted, what is the one, not the one thing, but what are the things that are more so keeping you motivated to stay in a team, to, you know, potentially continue your endeavors into esports?
Well, you kind of answered the question for me already because it's one word that you said already. That's literally like the friends and relationships that I've made and meeting these people and having the opportunity to go to these majors and stuff. And, being able to go there and actually meet up with friends that I've met through these organizations, you and other people and stuff, of course, Champ and other people. It's literally mainly the friendship and relationships that I make that keeps me more intertwined in it than anything else. It's mostly that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, when it comes to joining a team, when it comes to joining a crew, and that's very much what it was for me at the beginning, was I just wanted to be part of something. I wanted to build more friendships. I wanted to get to know more people. I wanted to have a reason to keep on playing this game. And you know, sometimes I hate playing the game, but you know, if I'm playing it with the homies, it makes it all much better.
Oh yeah,
Um,
no, for me too, 100%.
yeah, and again, streaming it as well. I'm having more fun when there's other people watching me play the game, and giving me that motivation to put myself out there, go to events, and meet people who are also passionate about the game. You know what I mean? And I think that that's the initial thing that I was seeking, and that's the thing that keeps me so invested in wanting to continue to do it moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
The last question, and you know, for the esports section and just in general, again, you've been an owner of a team, you've been through a lot of different things when it comes to esports, and you know, running things, being part of things. Is there any advice that you would give for to people who are looking to get into esports, or even actually consider starting up a team of their own?
Funny enough, you actually mentioned this because I saw a question on this on Twitter the other day, and I actually wrote a response to it. So one thing I will give advice for if you're someone looking to start up a team. Now, I speak from experience of this because I had to learn the hard way for this. So I'm going to give you this advice because I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I did. So when making a team, if you're looking to have it be a brand that you're looking to be very passionate about and you want to grow it into, if you want to grow it and basically put money into it, one thing you need to keep in mind when doing that is set yourself a budget and only put in as amount that you feel is feasible and essential for the team.
Yep.
Don't go overboard because that's going to come back and bite you in the ass. It happened to me, which is part of the reason why Nova is not around anymore. Uh, so definitely you need to be careful with how much money you're tossing in at once because if you put too much, there's might not be enough return, and of course, setting a budget because I know everybody's not rich, obviously. So whatever your budget is, or how much you're willing to put in, and how much you know that you're able to put in, what you can afford to do, don't overdo it, and literally make yourself a budget and have like a plan, like a list, something set out that that like money's gonna go into maybe into players or money's going to go into graphics design or tournaments, whatever it may be. Have yourself a planned budget because that's the best way you could possibly plan it out. Because if you don't do that, you're probably going to end up putting in more money that you can afford, and it's going to come back and it's going to be consequences for you. And that's something that happened with me. It wasn't entirely my fault because I'm not going to get into names here, but you probably know who I'm talking about. Um, I'm not going to get into names, but even though it wasn't entirely my fault, there was issues that I felt like at times I did put in money that I felt like I shouldn't have. So that's one thing I would definitely give advice to someone if you look to start up a team. Definitely be careful in the money aspect of things because that's one of the most important parts of running a team. Is definitely the financial side of things because if you overdo it, then it can lead to negative effects. So definitely have a budget for something like that. Um, if you're looking someone to be a competitor, if it's in, I mean, advice for being a competitor, I really can't speak on the front aside from like Smash, and I guess I could speak about other FGC games because it's still kind of in the same realm as Smash, because it's still technically a fighting game, I guess. But if you're looking to compete in like some kind of fighting game in esports, whether it be Street Fighter, Tekken, Blaze Blue, Mortal Kombat, whatever it is, or if it's just Smash Brothers. If you're looking to get into it, just my advice is see what's in your area, see what people are around, see what tournaments you can go to. You know, if you're really passionate and you want to get good at the game, maybe see if you can get yourself an offline training partner. I know that's something people do to really train because training on Wi-Fi is probably the worst thing you could probably do. I know during the pandemic people did not like doing that. So if you're really looking to really go offline or just start competing in general, just again, like I said, look around your area, meet new people, get those experiences, make friendships, and just try and put most the effort that you can into whatever game you're playing. And it's really all I got about to say. It's honestly just comes with passion. If you're passionate about it, just go for it. That's all I can really say.
Yeah, no, 100%. I totally agree with both aspects. I think um as being an organization owner, the piece of advice is definitely very relevant, especially if you aren't backed by like a big company, or have this big investment that you can afford to invest into players, or just like super high quality graphics or whatever. Pace yourself. Pace yourself in the way that you do things. If you're passionate about it, success will come your way, but it's very much like you pacing yourself. Take your time with it. You might want to hit the ground running, but and you might find some success from doing it. You might stand out right away, but it's all about, like, it's a marathon. You have to be built for that, otherwise you are going to fall short and your stamina is gonna deplete very quickly. And I very much know that. Initially, I was caught in the excitement of people taking interest in what was Deathbed at the time, and I was bringing on a ton of players, and it just became very overwhelming, to the point where over time I was faced with having to make cuts, and having to really reevaluate the formula that I was sort of undergoing with what is now Ultra. And we're kind of like in a like kind of just chill period of it, just due to that fact of, like, trying to make sure that I reevaluate the way that I go ahead and process things and operate. So I think that just pace yourself, and more importantly too is be open minded. Be
For
open to
sure.
it. Be open to advice. Never shy away from listening to people, whether regardless of the role that they play, even if it's a competitor, if it's just someone on the outside. Be able to take criticism, and be open to advice, because again, I would not be able to do it if I was super close minded, if I was just not allowing people to give me advice or to lend a helping hand. And that's another thing too. Be open to receiving help. You know what I mean? Initially, it was mainly me. Of course, I had help from Champ, and then eventually Cody, and eventually, Scott stepped in, and then just even through that, help from graphic designers, people who are legitimately just interested in helping grow something and seeing the success of something. Be willing to receive help. And you might think that you're able to do everything and anything. It might be hard for you to hand over the keys to someone to potentially have access to your Twitter or social medias, or to run things. You might want to overlook literally everything and anything, but the truth of the matter is, it that is going to lead to you being extremely burnt out, and it's not going to be the most healthy for you and for the sake of the team. So be willing to receive advice, and be willing to receive help from others. There's going to be people that are legitimately interested in helping you out, so of course vet them and see what they legitimately want out of it. And if you come to the conclusion that this person is a good person and they legitimately just want to help, then be open to it. You know what I mean? Don't be so close minded, and be willing to listen and do that. When it comes to a competitor, again, I've never been a competitor, but again, as someone who recruits people and is willing and is actively looking for individuals to bring onto the team, uh try your best to market yourself, put yourself out there, post your clips. If you could do content, do content. Build up your own personal brand, because again, at any moment's notice, without you knowing what is happening, whatever organization you're interested in, or whatever organization you're in, could potentially just cease operations one day, and you didn't build up your brand. You weren't marketable, and you didn't promote yourself as talented, as artistic, as funny or witty or whatever it is that you are. All the skills, you didn't promote yourself. So promote yourself. Showcase to the world what your skills. If you're funny, put out that side of yourself out there. Create content. Um, Make a name for yourself in the communities. Like Cody said, look for those resources offline. And if you don't have any offline resources, then try to make a name for yourself offline. Create that opportunity for yourself. I mean, online. Create that opportunity for yourself to potentially get those resources to go offline. So I think those are my best pieces of advice for anybody looking to start up a team, or anybody potentially looking to join a team. Um,
I
but
agree with all of that, 100%.
yeah, but
You made you made some good points there that actually slipped my mind, honestly.
yeah. Again, at the end of the day, you're a competitor. You got to do what's best for you. Because again, if a team shuts down that you're in, you don't want that to be the only thing that you are holding on to. If a team shuts down and you went out of your way to build up your numbers or to market yourself, people aren't going to associate you for the team that you were with. People are going to associate you for you. And if you're able to achieve that, then you've already hit some sort of success.
Bro's foreshadowing the team ultra shutdown. Not playing.
let me schedule this tweet longer. Nah, nah, nah. Not anytime soon. But yeah, so that's gonna do it. That's my list of questions and things that I wanted to get into. We went on for a good bit, and I just want to say big thank you to you for coming on. And you
Thank
know
you for having me.
no, yeah, of course. And when I thought about having guests on, you were obviously one of the first people that came to mind, just due to the amount of similarities that we have, within esports, content creation, and gaming. We share a lot of similar opinions, and so I very much credit that to being one of the reasons why I consider you a close friend, and why we continue to just talk to one another about our thoughts and opinions about different things. So yeah.
Yeah, same for me. I've known you for about like a little bit over 2 years now. Like honestly, I feel like I relate to you in a lot of ways. So it's always a pleasure talking to you, regardless. So
Thank you, bro. Yeah, always a pleasure to collaborate as well. And this won't be the last time. Again, I still have that video in the back burner. I just gotta get off my ass and edit it. But before we wrap it up, I want to give you an opportunity to shout yourself out. I know we mentioned esports, gaming, and content creation. So whatever you have going on, wherever people could find you, let us know.
all right, so the main place that you can find me right now is definitely twitter.com. Well, as it's called X, but
X.
you'll never hear me call it X ever in a day of my life, bro. So you can find me on Twitter at I'mJustCody1. I'm sure 11 will have a link in that in the description, or if there's something on screen, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I
But
will.
okay, that's where you can find me at. That's where I post all my stuff on my Twitter. That's where you can find in my bio. It'll take you to, if you click the link that's in my bio, it'll take you to another page, and that page has links to all my other social medias, like my YouTube, my Twitch. I haven't a link. I even have a link to my TikTok on there, which I haven't even freaking used yet. I don't know why, but it's on there. I think there's a link to my Discord server there too, which you can join if you want to, if you're interested in Smash tournaments, because there is a bi-weekly tournament series that I run called Smash Flare. It is bi-weekly. However, the last one I ran was almost a month ago now. I just didn't really have time to run a third one just yet, but I am planning a third one pretty soon. So that's where you can join that. It's ultimate focused. There is times where it will be melee, that's for sure. The next one might be melee, actually. I've been debating whether I want to do that or not. Because I originally did announce it to be melee, but I'm not sure if I'm going to go full-fledged with that just yet. So if you're an ultimate player or melee player, definitely keep in touch with that if you're interested in that. YouTube, of course. YouTube is I'm not really too active on that right now, but that's where I post all my content regarding Smash, sometimes Mario stuff, Metroid. Definitely Metroid Prime 4 comes out, I'll be milking the fuck out of that shit. So for sure, I'm waiting 7 damn years for that game, dude.
Fuck yeah, dude.
By the time it comes out, it'll probably be close to 8 years. So almost almost close to a full decade. That's crazy. Um, so there's that. a few other little
Twitch.
games. Oh yeah, Twitch. There's that too. So yeah, that's the YouTube side of things for the most part. Twitch is where you can find me, where I stream Smash. Sometimes I do speedruns, not very a whole lot. Right now, I'm currently doing Super Mario Eclipse speedruns. Don't know how long I'll do that. It is just a ROM hack, but a lot of people are giving it attention. Which, if you're a Sunshine fan, you should really go play Eclipse because that is a fantastic ROM hack. It's incredible. It's huge. It's something that developers are working on for about 5 years, and it's a masterpiece of a ROM hack. You should definitely check it out. So that's where you can find me: Twitch, stream Smash, speedruns, sometimes single player casual games, and just a whole bunch of other stuff. Just a good time, I guess. Yeah. So I guess that's really about it for me. Those are really all the platforms you can find me at. Twitter is definitely the best way to stay in touch with me, though, for the most part, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and everything that Cody mentioned and everything else, you can find down below in the description. Please check Cody out. Again, pretty active on Twitter, streams here and there. Stay tuned for the content as well and for future editions of Smash Flare, whether they be Ultimate or Melee. But that's gonna do it for
And Switch 2 coverage, because whenever that damn console gets announced,
oh hell yeah, dude. It's gonna be full force.
it's gonna be full
Uh
force.
this was episode 8 of Whatever Forever. I'm not sure who will be featured on next time. Again, I'm gonna try to branch out, get a little bit out of my not so much, of course I'm gonna feature my friend group and people that are potentially interested in doing so, but trying to branch out to people within the Smash Brothers community or just people that I meet that I am interested in interviewing. So if you have any suggestions of who you would potentially reach out, be realistic, because I know some people are gonna be like, "Hey, hit up Moist Critical, hit up." There was like this ongoing meme back when I was streaming on Twitch, like super active, where people were trying to get me to raid Moist Critical like all the time, and I'm like, bro, he's streaming to like thousands of people. Like he probably doesn't even have the raid announcements on. We're probably gonna get roasted for fucking raiding him with like 10 viewers. Uh, but anyways, yeah, that's gonna do it for episode 8 of Whatever Forever. Thank you to those of you guys who are watching. Again, if you guys are interested in listening to it on the audio side of things, check down below in the description because there is a link to the Spotify version of it. If you guys just want to pop it in the background, maybe you're doing something, you kind of want to just hang out and listen to a podcast for a bit, you could check it out there. But yeah, thank you once again, Cody, for being part of it, and thank you for being a fucking awesome homie, man.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and also thank you for being an awesome homie too.
Thank you, bro. But
But
yeah,
gotta
take
gotta be a part of it.
take care, guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.